of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Chris, will you please call the roll?
Chair Tharp,
Here.
Vice Chair Hedlund,
Here.
Lisa Schmidt,
Here.
Ron Swinger,
Here.
Madeline Quinlan,
Here.
Jane Hammond,
Here.
Renee Rasmussen,
Here.
Gavin Mao,
Excuse.
Superintendent Arnson's office.
Here.
Commissioner Christian's office. Governor Jean Forte's office.
Thank you. Montana Board of Public Education encourages the public to participate in board discussions. Persons who wish to participate should sign the public comment sign-in sheet and identify themselves to the board chair or executive director prior to the board's consideration of the matter in which they are concerned. Anyone wishing to participate in board discussions will be recognized by the chair in keeping with normal board parliamentary procedure. We discourage public comment on personnel matters and ask that you discuss these issues in private with the board chair. The Montana Board of Public Education is a professional development unit provider. Attending a Board of Public Ed meeting may qualify you to receive professional development units. Please complete the necessary information on the sign-in sheet if you are applying for these professional development units. At this time, we welcome our visitors. Start with any visitors in the room which wish to identify themselves.
Good morning, everybody. I was unable to be here yesterday. I'm Rob Watson, School Administrator of Montana.
Good morning, my name is Dan Lamb, the Dean of Education, University of Montana.
Good morning, my name is Tricia Seifert. I'm the Dean of the College of Education, Health and Human Development at Montana State University in Bozeman. Good morning, I'm Papa. I'm Chief Program Officer, OPI. Good morning, Christy Steinberg, Director of Accreditation and Licensure, University of Montana.
Thank you. Do we have any visitors online that would like to introduce? Okay, at this time, we'll go, is there any public comment? So we will have public comment before any action items today, but just want to see if there is any general public comment. All right. Seeing that, we will proceed with our agenda. We are on item number 15, and this pertains to the assessment committee. So we'll hand things over to Dr. Slinger. Board members, we are on page 372 of your packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that very much. We have guests that will be zooming in for a presentation from Waterford. They're doing a presentation on early literacy, targeted intervention, home-based program presentation. I believe we have Mr. Jones and Dr. Burns that'll be joining us today. Welcome. We're excited to hear your presentation. And unlike my colleagues, I like to stay on time. So you have 30 minutes, and please leave time within that 30 minutes to answer questions from the board.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I'm gonna share my screen now. Again, thank you all for allowing me to join this call and to interrupt your board meeting a little bit and to talk to you a little bit about Waterford and the incredible work that we're doing, not only here in Montana, but in other states across the country. My name is Kennard Jones. I am the Senior Vice President of Government Relations here at Waterford. I know you all see my colleague, Dr. Courtney Burns, on here. However, something came up last minute, so she's not able to make it. So unfortunately, you are stuck with me for the next 25, 30 odd minutes, but we're going to have a good time. So who exactly is Waterford.org? Waterford.org is a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring every child has the opportunity to succeed. Our mission is to provide educational resources that empower families, educators, and communities through technological-driven programs. We are committed to universal literacy, equity, and excellence in early education. We focus on family empowerment and providing essential teacher services. Here at Waterford, we combine three promising things together to make our program work so great. We combine the science of learning, the power of mentoring, and the promise of technology. This combination helps build strong family and community partnership, ensuring access to high-quality early education for all children. Here at Waterford, we understand that there are a few early learning needs that every child or community need. The first being children need access to quality early learning experiences to prepare for academic success. Second, families seek meaningful guidance on supporting at-home learning. The third, educators require resources and data to implement research-based practices. And the fourth, communities need scalable models to offer early learning opportunities to all children and families. So how exactly does our Waterford Upstart program work? Children engage with our adaptive reading curriculum for 15 to 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Families receive coaching to ensure strong engagement. Support is provided in English and Spanish with additional languages available as needed. And computers and internet access are provided for families that need it. We have instructional model. We are not a drill and kill, and we are not a digital worksheets. Learners progress through an adaptive learning path. It starts with a skill check, aka a formative assessment. If the child demonstrates proficiency with that skill, they'll advance to the next skill so they don't become bored by skills they already know. If the child has not demonstrated proficiency, they'll work through a series of learning activities, first being introduced to the concept, followed by explicit instruction, guided practice, and then another skill check before applying that practice independently. Skills are revisited throughout the learning path as reinforcement. To build the Waterford curriculum, the team first looked at research on how children learn to read. Next, we examined principles of effective instruction. And finally, we looked at how young children acquire, retain, and recall information. The Waterford reading curriculum is rooted in the science of reading. It's extensive, and it offers learners over 225 hours of engaging, explicit instruction. The same care that went into the development of the reading curriculum was put into the math curriculum. As you can see by the image, the math curriculum is founded on 5 strands. 1, number and cardinality, operations and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, geometry, and science. Woven into Waterford programs are mindset skills including self-awareness, social awareness, citizenship, and executive function. Mindset skills support the acquisition and development of important skills to foster a positive attitude, growth mindset, and self-regulation and empathy for others. The second way we help families support their child is through resources that they can access for use offline. These resources include items that support what the child is encountering in the read, math, and science curricula, and items are designed to support social emotional development. This chart shows data from our school year program from last year. This program was an extension of our summer learning path program where we enrolled 389 kids during the summer of 2023. We see strong representation across various counties in a diverse range of ethnic backgrounds. When using the reading program, participants encounter activities in 5 instruction strands: comprehension and vocabulary, fluency, language concepts, phonics, and phonological awareness. As an adaptive curriculum, children encounter more advanced skills as they successfully progress through the content and demonstrate sufficient concept understanding. As the most advanced type of skills, it is possible that no children encounter skills on the fluency strand, which is why it doesn't appear above. This chart shows the average score out of 100 of all reading skills encountered on a given strand for children participating in this program. The gold line shows the goal score of 80. A child scoring at or above 80 for any given skill is demonstrating sufficient understanding of the concept. This chart shows the average skill strand performance for children in North Dakota and Utah during the 2023-2024 school year. As you can see, the performance of children in Montana was very similar to that of children in nearby states. To measure learning success and skills gained in reading with Waterford Upstart, students take an assessment at the beginning and end of the program. The Waterford Assessment of Core Skills, otherwise known as WACS, is a computer adaptive test of early literacy designed for pre-kindergarten to second grade students with initial content validity established against state and national standards. This chart shows average score and grade level equivalent for participants in the program performance in each of the sub-skill categories assessed by WACS. The goal line indicates the kindergarten beginning score. As you can see, scores in most skill strands averaged above the kindergarten beginning level, providing a strong indication of school readiness. 85% of children who completed the post-program assessment scored at kindergarten beginning or above, demonstrating strong school readiness outcomes. This chart shows the average sub-skill WACS performance for children in North Dakota and Utah during the 2023-2024 school year. As you can see, the performance of children in Montana was very similar to that of children in nearby states. First, I just want to say thank you all again for giving me the time to present. I believe, I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. I tried to get in and get out so that you can continue your important work. But as always, thank you all. My contact information is listed here if you have any other follow-up questions, but I'll also stand for any questions that you may have now.
Mr. Jones, excellent time management, sir. So, thank you very much for the presentation. Does any board members have any questions? Yes, Board Member Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real words, would you describe that to me and see if you can explain why Montana is so far ahead of North Dakota and Utah on real words in your upstart chart?
So you're talking about the real words piece?
Yes.
Barker, yeah.
So I believe, and I'm not sure if I'm the right one to answer that particular question, but I believe on just how adaptive our program is, especially to the needs of kids who are going through it. Certain kids start at different levels and go through at different levels. So I believe our program adapted to it better, or adapted in a different ways. But I can get a better answer for you and get it over to you.
Thank you.
Board Member Quinlan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. My question has to do with, the slide you showed initially that said that a child spends 15 to 30 minutes a day, on this, which I was surprised seemed, shorter than I expected. So what happens in the 15 to 30 minutes? And then clearly you've shown a lot of resources that can be augmented to that. So how does that play out? And I don't know whether you can tell what an average time on the program is for a child. I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, of course. Really great question. Typically, the average time on our program for children is roughly around 15 to 60 minutes. It's not 60, 15 to 16 minutes a day. During that time, kids go through our program, they get all the curriculum and everything. But also, let's say, a kid or is struggling and our program coach catches that. Our program coach could come in and kind of work with the kid and the family during that time. So at times, that's why it gets to that 30-minute period, because it may be where the program coach is coming in to facilitate and help the kid and the caregiver or the parents or whoever go through the program successfully.
So those gains that you showed for Montana's 4-year-olds or children in the program, is that based on a child just spending 15 minutes a day?
Yes, so it's based on the 15, 30 minutes a day, and then that wax assessment, so that assessment score before the kid joins the program and then after the kid leaves the program.
And then does your program include resources for parents to sort of improve their own coaching skills and teaching skills with their child?
So our program coach, our program doesn't do it, but our program coaches who are assigned to those families do an incredible job at that, where, they set the parents and the families up for success, not only for our program, but long-term as well. So the program coaches really play a coaching role, not with only just helping the kids get through the program successfully, but also sharing with families on and parents or whoever on how to work with their kids on different learning skills and things of that nature. And you hear a lot where families will come and testimony and say that whoever their program coach was, they develop a really good long-term relationship with them because, and all honestly, our program coaches are usually on, in some cases, a full-time 24 hours on call where, something may come up or something may arise early in the morning or late at night outside of usual business hours that our program coaches jump on and talk the family through and help them through whatever they may need.
Thank you.
Does any other board members have any questions? Board Member Hammond.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I missed this. How many kids in Montana are in this upstart graph that you gave? What's the number?
Of who are currently in the program right now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So currently in the current program, I believe last time I checked, we were somewhere in, I believe, 980 licenses have been claimed by school districts for our Upstart program. And then we are working with those school districts to get those families signed up and using it.
Does Superintendent's office have a follow-up on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Tharp, and Board Member Slinger. We are up to 1,000 licenses. Yeah.
For last year in these charts?
Well, for last year in those charts, that was different. For this current
Right, I
year, what
wanna
we're
know
looking
last
for.
year.
But for last year, I don't know what those are. That didn't run through.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you're talking about this year. For last year, we had 389 for our summer program, and then for our full school year program, we had 200 kids.
Thank you.
I have a clarifying question to the superintendent's office too, that might help. Okay. Chrissy, can you tell us, for folks that are doing Waterford in the home-based program
Yes.
as part of early literacy,
Yeah.
are they also for the most part participating in like a four-year program? They're also probably enrolled in school. So it's not supplant, it's supplement. Is that right?
Yes, Chair Tharp, Executive Director Flynn, that's correct. They're determined eligible at their district. And if they're eligible, then they can participate in whatever offerings the district has. So we don't know for sure how many are participating in home-based and in a jumpstart and in maybe a classroom-based if they're, of that age, but they could participate in any of those offerings by the district.
More than one.
They could participate in more than one potentially.
And it's my understanding is as we get more data and we have, this is super early on in the
Mhm.
process for early literacy, but as we continue on, we'll get more data. And we'll be able to know how
Right.
districts are offering that and how students and families are taking advantage of it.
Exactly.
Well, I think at first snapshot, it's exciting results. So as it expands, let's hope that that continues at those levels. Is there any other questions for any board members? Mr. Jones, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Next up, we will ask the Executive Director Flynn on item 16 to be as efficient as he was, his time. She helps us, gives us information on early literacy screening protocols.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not starting off well.
Sorry.
Just saying.
Mr. Chair, as you know, the board created rules around early literacy. We were able yesterday to go and see an early literacy program in action here in Livingston. It was really excellent to be able to see not only the program, but a screening of a young student, and just really want to thank Livingston for giving us that opportunity. I think it was really special for us to be able to do that. But in order to make that happen, the board did have to adopt a couple rules to assist us in really implementing that program from the state level. One of those rules noted that there would be a list of approved screening tools as approved by the Board of Public Education, and we would be reviewing those in odd years. So in order to formalize that process, I've been working with a group of assessment experts here in Montana to help us create sort of that process for when we review that list. What does it look like if we have other vendors coming to us that want to ensure that their assessment is on this list? The list that you see here was highly vetted by the Early Literacy Advisory Council. There were some requirements in legislation, and then they even went over and above those requirements to make sure that the list that we had was really high quality and truly the best of the best. So for those who may be wishing to become part of that list, because we know it will happen, I've been working with these folks to sort of formalize a process that makes it easier for us on our end when we're reviewing those lists of approved screening tools. So on page 389 of your packet, you'll see that there's an application that we put together. It's the proposed criteria. Unfortunately, it's obviously you probably know by now, none of the experts were able to join us today, which is why you just have me. But I can give you sort of a high level overview of what the intent was with these documents. And then it's my hope that when we're in Bozeman in November, that they'll be able to join us. They actually all live in Bozeman. So they're hoping to join us then, answer any of your questions, and then we'll take action on it then. So for the application on page 389, you'll see that right off the bat, there's sort of a list of skills. And that's because those are the skills that you all approved as part of the rule package, that these are the necessary skills that students need in order to determine whether they're eligible for their programs or not. You heard a little bit about those first three as part of the early literacy program yesterday, so these should be a bit familiar. The team also thought it was really important to know, like, is this an early literacy screener? Is this an oral language screener? Is this a literacy and oral language screener? And then how it's referenced. Is it criterion referenced or norm referenced? These checkpoints they're not necessarily going to be part of the criterion that, like, if it's only criterion referenced, you're not going to make the list. It's just something really good for us to know so that we can put that in the crosswalk that we have for folks when they're looking at screeners. And then you'll see here that from 3 to 18, there's a number of questions that are asked. These are actually really important questions. Some of them I probably can't explain the importance behind them, but were really important to the team members at getting at exactly what the screener does and how long it's been how long it's been in the field, how long the last time it's been reviewed and updated. Those were really important to the team. Like I said, some of these were required by the legislation. For example, the first two is the assessment developmentally appropriate and research-based, as well as does it align with formative assessments and is it cost-effective? The cost-effective piece is a little interesting because I think initially the legislation assumed that this board would approve one tool that every school district had to use, and we decided not to go that route. So the cost-effective piece is important for school districts to be able to know and learn more about as they're looking at which screeners they want to use. But we're not putting a lot of weight on that here, given that it is going to be up to each individual school district on what they want to use. And then you'll see on page 391 is sort of the reverse the criteria. And it's really just taking that information from the application, putting it into a document where we can somewhat score based on the evidence that is shown. The team members have kindly offered to help support this process, at least in this first year, seeing if and when we get any applications. We'll bring that timeline to you at your next meeting in November when we have it finalized, but the hope is that this board will review that list of approved screening tools at your March meeting and take action to formalize that, because if you remember, schools will be assessing kids in April, May, and June. So it's really important that we have that sort of finalized in March for school districts to be ready. And frankly, they'll probably already have something chosen by then. But any questions?
So McCall, does a tool that's already been approved, does it have to reapply each time?
Good question, Mr. Chair, Board Member Quinlan. They do not have to reapply. Once you're on the list, you can stay on the list. And this is really for those new vendors who are hoping to get on the list. And I did talk to the team as well, and they're hoping to score each of those that are on the list. And these questions were really based off of knowing who is on the list now and making sure that they would fit within these parameters. So that team is going to score these so that the ones that are on the list already, to make sure that everyone has sort of an application and has gone through the criteria.
Do we have a way, I take it we're getting either a PDF or a Word, Word document. Do we have a way of turning this into data? Are we taking these applications and taking their information about which boxes they check for language and et cetera? Are we turning it into data that we can then rely on for our future analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. Board Member Quinlan, even on the website now, we have the crosswalk from those that are on the list of approved screening tools, and those boxes, those are all identified on that crosswalk already of what the skills that those assessments are proven to assess. And so I think it's a good point, just as a reminder, there's often different assessments for like pre-kindergarten, so like early, children who are 3, 4, then there are those who are school aged. And so in our crosswalk and in the list of approved screening tools, they're actually separated in whether it's sort of an early screener or a school age screener, because those skills are different, and the skills also are set up that way in our rules to be different for those grades. And so we have that data already for the list of approved screening tools that's currently been approved by the board.
And is the same true for the written responses that they have related to the the criteria, but also they're giving us descriptive information.
Right, Board Member Quinlan, we don't have that yet, at least not in a formal way. Their manuals, they've gone through the manuals to find this data, but we don't have it in a formal place at this point, but we will get it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members? Yep.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, please.
Yes, board member Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm looking at question number 18. Can the assessment be given in English and Spanish? And I wonder if that should be expanded, especially in light of things like Billings as multi-language school, et cetera, and more appropriately say what other languages besides English is your screener available in? Because it might be possible that some place would be looking at a screener for a particular language, and this would not give them that information.
That's excellent input. Thank you very much, board member. Any other board member? Oh, superintendent's office.
Thank you. I don't have a question as much as I just wanted to share. Our early literacy specialists have noted that some of our districts have reached out to them, just saying that some of the vendors have been very friendly in reaching out to offer their services. So I just wanted to share that with the board, that they are very aware of the approved screening list, and they are actively following up on that with our district. So we just wanted to share that is some feedback that our early literacy specialists have received. So I wanted to share.
I'm sure we are all shocked. But
Yes.
take that advantage of that, but that's good news also. Any other questions? Yes. board member.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering, Mrs. McCall, that crosswalk you were talking about, is there a way of using that after a year, and after 2 years, and after 5 years, and after 10 years, track the kids and see what the impact may have been, or how successful various vendors were in these categories. It's the kind of tracking that we need to start to do with curriculum too.
Yeah, Board Member Hammond, I think that's a really good point, and I know that Christy and I have talked too about how important that data collection is going to be, and I know, and I'll just let you maybe talk about how that data collection is going and how you have that, it's like a drop down and your reporting
Absolutely.
system. Go ahead,
Yeah.
yeah.
Chair Tharp, Executive Director Flynn, we are collecting that data. We are, as school districts are entering the information in on their early literacy intervention programs. We're asking what screener that they used to determine their eligibility. And so they need to identify that. So we'll be able to share that information again later once all the data comes in. But yes, that's part of that data ask, and part of the efficacy too of we're asking some efficacy questions for the schools themselves. How do they feel that it went from their perspective, and how they're tracking the growth for students? So we were gathering that information.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? See no other questions? Thank you, Executive Flynn. You did go very close to your time limit, but I do appreciate you filling in. And Chairman Tharp, I'm more than happy to turn the gavel back over to you with time to spare.
All right, thank you, sir. Our next agenda item is item number 17, and these next several items are part of the accreditation committee. So we'll hand things over to the accreditation committee chair, Madeline Quinlan, and also Chair Quinlan, prior to diving in on item 17, did you want to give the board an update on our latest discussion with Cognia?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had that note. I just wanted to share that the accreditation committee has had an opportunity to meet with representatives from Cognia about how we can pursue Cognia accreditation as part of the integrate that with the Montana accreditation process. We're at a preliminary conversations, but everything seemed like it was ready to progress. Everybody was interested in it. So I just wanted to comment on that. We'll at some point have more information to share. With that, Mr. Chair, our item 17 is our next item, and that is an action item for us to move forward with the publication for public hearing and the timeline for the math content standards. So I'd like to turn that over. I'd like to turn that over to Director Flynn. At the moment, we did find some changes that we'd like to make in the rules before they go out for a public hearing. And I welcome any comments from OPI after McCall talks about some of those changes.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I actually just pulled up my screen here. So I wanted to show you, Board Member Quinlan and I were going through the math adoption notice, or I'm sorry, the math proposal notice. And there were just a couple of sections that seemed like the language didn't quite make sense to our for our reading. And so I worked with folks at OPI to really get a better understanding of what this needed to look like, to make sure that we weren't making any changes, but that it also read a little clearer. So I want to explain first, and I know Marie's on, so please jump in, Marie, if I get this totally wrong. But first off, where it says mathematics, numeric reasoning, and new rule 1, you see that right after that, there's a semicolon. And in transparency, that is actually what our current rules, the way it's listed in a lot of sections, not all, but in a lot of them. And so they wanted to sort of keep that process, but the rule is literally called numeric reasoning standards. And so we thought it was a bit repetitive to have it just continue, just because the current rules actually are listed that way. So taking that piece out, and so you'll see that's the major change here, is just really taking out that language pre sort of semicolon. And then just, you'll see here that it just says now the real number system content standards for high school are. And then I'll scroll down a bit so that you could see the same in the next new rule. You know, same concept, the functions, content, standards for high school are. And then you'll see, because this one had multiple sections, that we just changed that then throughout the rule. There were a couple other, just small things that were caught throughout this as well. Madam Chair, do you want me to? Oh, sure. Okay, please. Close your eyes so you don't get whiplash here. Just gonna keep scrolling till I find one. This one, there was just a duplication here. 1A and 1A were the same by accident, so we just took that out. And then I just renumbered those for the sake of the rule. Here in C, verify needed to be verifying. Just updated that. So sorry. Yep. Here in this section, you'll see that they removed the reference to Montana American Indians and then included it down below in the same rule, but Indians just wasn't struck. So just struck that one.
Somewhere in there, there's a comment.
Oh, on page 10.
Thank you.
Sorry, right here, there is a comma that needed to be removed. Red. Renee, do you want to jump in? I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Yes, ma'am, I know this is math, but as the English teacher, you never put a colon between the verb and the direct object or the verb and the predicate nominative. So in any of the rules that end with R, A-R-E, there would not be a colon after that. There'd simply be a list. And that might clarify your multiple use of colons and your problem here. So I haven't looked to see if that would advise every state, but that's the rules in grammar. No colon between the verb and the direct object, even if the direct object is a clause, and no colon between a linking verb like are and its predicate nominative.
I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
Okay, does
Yeah.
that?
Why don't we just take out all the R's?
I think, let's go with the proposed language. I don't think we need committee work on this, but I think we've cleaned up the basics of it. So that's the proposal at this point. Do you have any other?
There were a couple others, but rather than scrolling, this document is 45 pages. So rather than scrolling through the whole thing, I can just tell you what the other two were. Typically sort of overarching umbrella purpose of rules is so that children know, understand, and are able to do, right? That's sort of what we constantly say. So in one section of this, it just said know and are able to do. So I included understand. And then there was one other place where the word needed an S at the end. And so I just added an S there. And that was something that Marie had caught. So there were just none of the changes, I will say, changed the intent of the rules. Really, it was just cleanup to make it read a little bit better, or, you know, finding random commas. So, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you and see if people have questions.
Thank you. Either Marie or Julie, if you want to comment on those changes, and then we'll go to the content of the standards.
Chair Quinlan and board members, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, we totally agree with the changes to make it clean. We were just matching what was previously in ARM or is right now. You'll see that where you have ARE in the colon, that's the intended to have a bulleted list underneath it. And that's how the current language is in ARM. So yeah, if there's any other question, I'd be glad to help support that.
Thank you. I would ask, since we're about to go out for rulemaking here, just if I could take, and looking at you, Julie or Marie, just take 2 minutes and sort of highlight the major changes or shifts in thinking or approach for these standards, and then we'll go to the motion.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. Do you want me to explain the major shifts?
Yes. Thank you.
So we actually go to the bottom of that document, McCall. We went through the reasoning for the amendments and Dr. Mergel and I sat down and really reviewed what are the big shifts that you're going to see. Do you want me to share screen on that, McCall?
I can do it. Let me
Perfect.
just go there before I go do that. How about that?
Perfect. So Dr. Mergel and I went through here to really go over the overview of what are the K-12 changes, what will you see at the elementary, and what will you see at the high school. So primarily the high school is where the biggest shifts were seen. And at the K-8, there was a lot of cleaning up and condensing. So it took many months with some incredible professionals that we were very lucky to have their support in looking at how do we make these clear for educators so that right now the current set of standards is so large and so ambiguous in a lot of ways, but also extremely specific in other ways that we wanted it clean and clear. So when you look at this, you'll see that many of them were intended reduced in size just to provide that clarity and also make the language more familiar to the families as they review them with their own children. There's a lot of work on the consistency. So for example, you'll see where it says word problems, or real world application. So not only the NRC, the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee, but also the task force decided, let's make it problems in context, K-12, and they took incredible amount of time to make sure that it made sense and was done well in context. If you could continue scrolling down for me, please, McCall, you'll see the word by, which was included there to help explain those progressive verbs. So when you're adding the E's, by identifying, by explaining, by justifying, whatever that may be. Another big attempt that you'll see throughout is looking at the latest research on the critical concepts and the mathematical practices. So those were updated quite a bit. Originally, there were 8 mathematical practices that were in line with the Common Core standard. So the task force took that thinking as well as the NAEP mathematical practices, and they put those together to make a nice clean pathway to combine them, as well as introducing the first mathematical practice that has cultural connections in the nation that we can find, which is where we really wanted to emphasize the Indian education for all and local context as well. Another big step that you'll see is the expansion of the fluency language. So as it was read before as a classroom teacher, you look at it as a first grade teacher and you think they'd have to master adding and subtracting with 20 with automaticity like this. And really they looked at the trajectory of when should they be doing that accurately and flexibly versus when do we want them to get to the efficiently point, which is when they're at that automaticity level. Continuing through, we talked a little bit about the IFA, but you'll also notice how that language was changed. That came from the task force and NRC and just trying to be the most respectful we can in that language using Montana Indigenous peoples and also making sure that it connected to the ones that made sense, pointing it out on this is an area that it should be taught with the local cultural context in mind. When we get to the high school, you'll see that the split up between the core and the core plus. I know we had a lot of conversation about that yesterday when we had the OTRI talking about those different systems and how that worked out. Again, just identifying what are the 2 years, if there's 2 years of math or 2 credits of math for that core, and then the additional core plus, where it goes to if you want to advance to a 3rd year of math or beyond. And then beyond that, you'll see some dedicated sections for modeling. So in that restructuring, they really made sure that modeling was spread out throughout instead of just with the different symbols they had before. And continuing down, I think we're almost done to the synopsis here. Thank you so much, McCall. Appreciate you. You'll look at just more of the high school explanations that we've talked about a few different times and just having that really smart trajectory of what that looks like versus the whole kitchen sink of everything in there. Also making sure that with those trajectories, there's a lot of opportunity for pathway building, but not tracking. So making sure that they can switch amongst their math courses, but also they aren't stuck within that when they're there. Does that support your question, Chair Quinlan and board members?
Yes, you did a very nice job. Thank you. I especially want to appreciate the work of OPI, the task force, and the negotiated rulemaking in addressing the integration with NAEP that you talked about, and also Indian Ed for All and the contributions of Montana Indigenous peoples. So I think we should talk about the timeline and then see what board questions we have. McCall, do you want to address the timeline on page 439?
You bet. Okay, there. Sorry, I really should have brought my mouse. Okay. Madam Chair, you'll see that today we will approve the rulemaking, and the timeline. We'll send the proposal to the Secretary of State's office. It's the next, proposal deadline is the 24th, which means that the notice will be public, on October 4th, and that's when public comment begins. We'll then have a public hearing date on October 29th. We will do that again via webinar, and the Zoom link is actually in the notice. The adoption notice then will come back, or I'm so sorry, public comment will end November 1st. And then at your meeting in November, there'll be an opportunity to respond to comments. And then the economic impact statement will go to the Education Interim Budget Committee. They have a meeting in December. So that will go to them. And then assuming that we don't need another round of responding to comments, that the board will then have an opportunity to take action on the adoption notice in January meeting.
With an effective date of July 1, 2026.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Are there board questions either on the rules themselves or the timeline?
Marie has anything.
Marie does.
Yes, thank you, Chair Quinlan and board members. I did want to note that Dr. Margle and I have been working on getting continual answers on the economic impact statement and just additional data collecting on that. We have not had a great response, so we're going to try one more great attempt to get more information to pass those through, particularly looking at the high school adjustments that are being proposed.
Great, thank you. Any questions from board members? Board member Hannah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was our question. Of the economic impact projections. Do we have any ballpark ideas yet?
Dr. Marble.
Chair Quinlan, Board Member Hammond, yes, so we had sent that out, we didn't get very many. We met, and McCall was there with the think tank. I asked some superintendents. I said, how can we get this out so we can get responses from you? And they indicated to me, they said, don't send it out via kind of general other communication. If you just send it directly to us to our email from you, we'll see it and we will respond to you. I said, okay, so I'm going to try that. So I'm going to send it directly out. We try not to send so much information out to our superintendents, but we feel like really that this does have the need for us to look really expansive to be able to really understand what is happening. And so we just want to make another effort because we've tried, right? And that approach did work. So we're going to give it another shot. So we're going to probably send that out here in the next week or two, as soon as we get done with Board of Public Ed, and then we'll get to it next week. But that's kind of what we're thinking. It doesn't change the survey or the questions that we're asking. It's just trying to be sure we get some more of the programs. We also know we'll be present at some other meetings where our superintendents will be, where we can kind of remind them and say, hey, here's this link right here. Please take a moment and fill it out. So thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Renee?
Yes, Madam Chair.
For Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman. I have read the rules, I would like to talk specifically about the high school rules. I read the high school rules very thoroughly, and I really like them. I understand what they're trying to accomplish, and I applaud them. But they are a humongous change and will mean a lot of change in thinking and approach and in program design, everything from the top to the bottom. Are we getting any preliminary feedback? Julie, I'm really interested. Dr. Margle, please excuse me. I'm really interested in, your response, the responses that you get from superintendents. Because, I'm reminded of the 30 years ago when we came up with a approach to math here in Montana, and it just never took off because I don't know all the problems. That was just as I was starting teaching. So, I'm hoping, or I guess I'm wondering if you've gotten any response that's gonna guide your preliminary response that's gonna guide your interaction, or if pretty much everybody's quiet so far.
So, Madam Chair, Board Member
Dr. Moore.
Rasmussen, that's a really good question. So what I would say is that, in terms of, we are already working at the agency, the task force that wrote and draft these have not actually stopped working. They've continued to work to say, how do we create guidance documents? How do we create, tools so that when it comes time, it's not just turn it on July 1 of 2026, that we're doing a nice, ramp up and providing professional development and providing guidance documents so that there is a longer path, if you will, to get to some of these bigger shifts, in particular in the high school. So they've never stopped working. The other thing is that we did obtain a contract to be able to put these standards, so when they're approved and ready to go, into a digital format so that teachers can just click and kind of add them into, lesson plans and have access to them in a way where they're not having to do so much, copying and pasting and downloading these documents in very difficult, because the way they sit in ARM are not very usable, if you will. And so we're working so that we have that ready to go so that it can be in that digital format and much more user friendly for the teachers. What we do here is that it will be a big shift in, like we have spoke about, in the high school, because it could require the way in which they staff, in the way in which they schedule. So the implications come not only from the planning and the guidance on how to use the standards, but how are you beginning to schedule? How do you look at your master schedule? How do you staff this? How do you work in this? Because you may have to begin to redo the way in which you organize some of your lessons. So it won't just be Algebra 1 and then Geometry 2, and you've got it all covered. You're going to have to integrate some of those other standards in there, especially the data literacy component. So so we are hearing, right? We know, but we do have some professors who've been on the task force who want to continue to be part of this conversation and saying from the EPP side, how do we help on our end as well? So I think it's a much bigger conversation than just here's the standards and the rules and we've updated and implemented. And we are hearing that from the field. So I think the timeline that we're setting is really important.
Dr.
Yeah, as board member Rasmussen was referring to the Sims project back as urban schooling. We basically took Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Advanced Math, and then took this structure of coursework and turned it like this. And so it really changed the approach. And University of Montana and Montana State collaboratively trained dozens of teachers, but they were, in order to do it right, it took weeks-long professional development voluntarily done on the campuses to pull it off. And the teachers that did it and with fidelity were successful and the students were successful, but it ended up being as when those teachers moved on, teachers who weren't trained in the process, the system ended up, they reverted back to what they were used to and what they knew. And so, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that the OPI and the team is still continuing to recognize that this is going to take a lot of professional development and a mind shift on how we approach mathematics instruction. Biggest issue we face is the continued effort to get people to realize that your textbook is not your curriculum. Your textbook is a tool that you use to teach the curriculum. And so finding materials that are aligned to this new approach is going to be a challenge. We unlike the state of Texas, we can't decide to just mandate that all the textbook manufacturers create the textbooks that are in perfect alignment with us. So we've always had to just go out and find the closest, bestest thing. I threw that bestest in there for you, Renee.
Thank you.
That's the challenge that we're facing. But I think it's a worthy effort because we need to make this shift. I think it's going to be vital, and but yeah, it's going to be tough.
Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to echo that and say, the reason I'm pounding this drum is because this has already been tried once and failed, and I think we need to take the lessons into consideration and make sure that everybody understands and knows the challenges that they face and is willing to step up. Otherwise, we'll face such a backlash. How long will it be before we can tackle this again? So I'm really interested in us taking a broad, thoughtful, comprehensive approach, addressing people's concerns and making sure they understand the benefits and everything. If an English person can see that, can get excited about this being really a great thing, I'd like to see that in the field, but I no longer have to hire the teachers, make the schedule, and train the teachers. You know, I'm past that. So I agree, Julie, it's going to take some time, and I will be continuing to ask questions about our readiness before I would be willing to put this into rule. Thank you.
Yes, one more comment. Thank you for that.
And Marie has her hand up.
I just want to say, Dr. Lark, you even brought up yesterday, the beginning stages of the early numeracy, right? We also have to be thinking about the early numeracy components, as Marie was speaking about, what it means to be flexible, what it means to be accurate, what it means to have all of that important number sets at those early stages. So I think we got a lot of work to do, not only at our high school, but I think in the beginning stages around early numeracy to further kind of development. And I think it's going to take a lot of partnerships with our EPPs and with our districts and our teachers and a very much more comprehensive approach. So thank you.
Marie?
Yes, thank you, Chair Quinlan. I did want to point out that our math instructional coordinator has already been on the road supporting districts with, hey, here's what we are proposing. What do you think? What are your ideas? And she's overwhelmingly, and that is Katrina Engeldrum, you've met her a few times. She's overwhelmingly getting nothing but excitement with the standards, with the acknowledgement of, yes, it's going to be a lot of work. It will require extra support, but they're thankful that there's an opening up of the pathways. There's more clarity for the standards that go in what courses versus the kitchen sink of, hey, this is Algebra 1, which then leads to them teaching just the Algebra 1 book, more so than actually looking at the standards. And then the reduction of the number of standards, and particularly the removal of concepts, this is her language, with specialized applications such as the matrices and vectors, which were moved to more advanced components. So just wanted to share that from her. She's already on the road. She's doing those things with a big, robust plan for the implementation as well.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, Mr. Chair, I'm ready for a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed notice of public hearing and timeline pertaining to rulemaking in ARM 10, Chapter 53, Mathematics Content Standards, and authorize the filing of the notice with the Secretary of State for publication in the Montana Administrative Register.
All right, and did you say that the notice as revised and tweaked?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, as the notice says revised this
Okay,
morning.
the motion is to adopt the proposed notice of public hearing and timeline as revised pertaining to the rulemaking for Title 10, Chapter 53. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Slinger. Any other board member discussion?
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, I
Board
just
Member
want to say, I really appreciate all the hard work that everyone has done. This is excellent. It's something we really need to do.
Thank you. Any other board member comment? Any public comment? She talked about partnership, Dr. Watson. We're counting on administrative support too. All right, you've heard the motion, the second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 18, this is yours as well, Chair Quinlan, and board members, we are on page 440.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope we can make up a little time right now. We have an action item here on the world language content standards. I believe we've received no public comments on the standards, so we are ready to move toward adoption. I want to recognize that the The new standards for world languages are a overhaul of the standards, repeal of existing standards and brand new ones. It's been 24 years. I'm reading this from the reason for adoption, but it's been 24 years since these, or more, since these standards have been revised. So we appreciate the work that's gone into this. It does a better job of defining the levels of novice, intermediate, and advanced performance, which among other things, I think will really help support our proficiency-based education efforts, and then identifies content or sort of significant areas of communication and community, and there's 5 of them here. So I think they're very well done, and take any questions from the board, and I'm ready for a motion.
And actually, Madam Chair, if I may, we aren't taking an action today on the final. Today's agenda item was action response to the comments, and because we have no comments, and because the Education Interim Committee won't review the economic impact statement until next week.
Okay.
And so the statute says that the board cannot actually adopt until the Education Interim Committee determines whether there's a substantial cost or not. So we actually won't be able to take action until January. And the reason for that is because we also can't take action in the last quarter before a legislative session on any rules. So yes, timing.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done with
Yeah.
Okay.
with the.
So, and there was no public comment at the hearing.
Correct.
Okay, so we will just have to sit on this until.
Can I just make public comment quickly on foreign language? Thank you. So, I just wanted to say that, we, will be presenting at an interim committee next week, but we did put forward an addendum. We did ask our superintendents in the think tank why we only got 3 responses on the world language economic impact. And the 3 responses were, do you think there's going to be an economic impact with the adoption of the world language standards? One person said yes, one person said no, and one person said maybe. So that was not very helpful information, if you will. So we did talk to them kind of and ask some follow-up questions. And what we heard from them is really with the world language, they weren't responding because many of the Class C and B and even some of our A schools utilize the Montana Digital Academy to teach world language. And as we saw yesterday in the presentation, that was the #1 class that is utilized. So they said in many ways they didn't respond because they don't purchase curriculum, they use the Digital Academy. They don't staff an individual because they use the Digital Academy. So they're meeting that through that need with the Digital Academy and paying the $125 per student. And so they said that even with the new rules, many of them wouldn't see a potential impact. So we did kind of add an addendum to that packet, not as part of necessarily within that economic impact, but to say we went and did further to try to understand it. And so the only place where we could see maybe potentially would be in updating curriculum at the AA's or the A schools where they're really staffing and offering that program themselves. So I just wanted to share with you that additional information that we had received, and we did put in that information and packet all of the schools and the languages that they are offering so that they can see how robust and what a big need in world languages that the Digital Academy is filling. So thank you very much.
Dr. Myrtle, it has the Digital Academy, do we make sure we notify them on changes in content standards? Are they in the loop?
Yes, Chair Quinlan, yes, they are, and I am fortunate to sit on the board of the NCDA, so I can reach out and share with them, and I know that Jason and Mike are part of our communications and keep in touch with us. Thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman, is it possible then that we ought to raise the issue with the interim and maybe the joint budget meeting on Thursday next week of passing a motion to allow us to proceed in November and not wait until January? Because it needs to be done, or it's just gonna sit for months with no real impact.
Well, I will say, Madam Chair, the effective date on this one, I think is it 2025 or 2026? 2025. Okay, so I think it's okay. It is in statute, so I don't know that they're gonna waive that just for us. Although it'd be nice. But I think at this point, given that there was no comments and that's the only way that what is proposed here would change, they can get started, right? The only action that we all have at this point is you approve it or you deny it. And from everything we hear, you know, I don't think there's any reason for you.
All right.
So,
Mr. Chair, item 19, is action on addendums to the accreditation status for 23-24 school year. And at this point, I will turn it over to Ellery Bressler and Crystal Andrews. All right. Good morning.
Good morning. Board chair, members of the board. My name is Ellery Bressler. I am the accreditation specialist at the Office of Public Instruction. We are here today to seek the approval of the 15 addendum to the 2024-2025 annual accreditation status report. These are all in one action item for you. On page 3, we also included in page 3 of the report, we also have included some addendums that were approved that you do not need to take action on, as they will not impact the overall accreditation status. And then on page 6, there are some addendums that were not approved. So back to the items you will be approving on page 1 and 2 of the report, you will see in the far column the reason they were approved, or going to you for approval, I should say, as well as which rubrics they will impact. You'll notice that the rubric areas for all of these are in for student performance, because that was half of the overall accreditation score. At this time, we are requesting the approval of these 15 addendums, and I stand for any questions.
And I just want to point out for board members or anyone who's listening, we're on page 460 of the board packet. Are you just doing the 15 items that have actually changed from advice to regular at this point that we would take questions on?
Yep, you are welcome to ask questions of the other, but the only ones you guys need to take action on are those 15, beginning on page 460 in your packet, because those actually impact the overall accreditation score. The other ones are just for information for you.
Are there any questions from board members? Board member Rasmussen.
I apologize. I was using my laptop as a table and it said I wanted to talk.
It knows you well. Any other board members? Questions? I want to appreciate your presentation here. I think it's laid out very well for board members to see the changes and the impacts and the additional evidence that school districts were able to submit. And I know this was a heavy lift, and we appreciate that that you were willing to go through all this from July until now. And I think this will really put us on the right foot for moving forward with next year and having schools be in an accreditation status that reflects district. Any other comments or questions from board members before I make a motion? Board member Slinger.
I would just like to thank the OPI for allowing for the supplemental difference information. Several of these were in the CMAS region. That's where I'm located at, and I attended that meeting, and yeah, several of them were not happy with their original accreditation status, which I understand, and but I'm sure they'll all be very appreciative of the fact that with the supplemental information provided, they were able to reach regular status. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please proceed.
I move to approve the addendums to the 23-24 annual Montana accreditation report.
Motion is.
Seconded.
addendum, seconded by Board Member Rasmussen. And then for the record, note this is 15 schools that had a change in overall status from either advice or deficient up to regular. There any other board member discussion? Any public comment?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to go up there?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
The mic actually is on too.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Rob Watson, Director of School Administrators of Montana. Just a couple of comments I'd like to make before you take action on this item. First of all, we do really appreciate the addendum process, the opportunity for schools to resubmit some pieces or maybe even point out some pieces that weren't actually available the first time, or maybe they weren't able to be seen the first time. So we appreciate the process. Also appreciate OPI taking the time to look at those and advance several of those from deficiency to regular status. I just have a couple of concerns and then probably a suggestion for you to consider. One thing that I would mention, and I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about the scoring process, and I think this is probably the best opportunity. As you know, we're going to continue this process with new rubrics going forward, and so I think it's important just to reflect a little bit about what I heard or concerns I have about the scoring process. You'll see it in the notes. There's several opportunities where it says evidence was not submitted, or also said info was in another section and they couldn't find it. So I do think it's a human process. The rubrics were very large, and districts sometimes put stuff in the wrong place, or sometimes it wasn't able to be found. I had one district that said they had all the information, but the OPI was not able to open their attachments, and they were never made aware that they couldn't open the attachments. So again, just some common issues around how they submitted evidence, which I'm hoping will get cleaned up as we move forward. The other concern I have with the scoring process is there seem to be some inconsistencies, which I did somewhat expect because we've got humans scoring these rubrics. So you're going to have some inconsistencies, and I get that. Appreciate the fact that the OPI made an effort to do some inter-rater reliability around scoring, but I want to point out what some of my districts saw with regards to inconsistencies. So for example, a district that had multiple schools at the same grade level band, they would submit applications for those schools, and sometimes the applications were very similar in terms of the evidence submitted, or in terms of the writing that was put into the application, and they got drastically different scores for basically the same application. One district quoted one school got 1s where another school got 4s. So I do believe there's some inconsistencies in the scoring process. I'm hoping that's going to get cleaned up as we move forward. As you know, anybody that's worked with accreditation, it takes years to really develop an inter-rater reliability around rubrics. So I'm hoping the OPI will put some time into that and some research into that to create that inter-rater reliability. Just a word about the addendum processes, and this is one concern I have, and I hope for your support in my suggestions. So the addendum process was confusing. There was the time of year was awkward for a lot of folks, a really short window around applying for an addendum. There was also a lot of confusion around whether they should apply or not apply for an addendum. In fact, some superintendents were told not to apply because it wouldn't impact their overall status. Other superintendents went ahead and applied anyway, which is why you see so many applications in there. And then I guess probably the biggest concern I have is that I encourage districts to apply because it does become an official record. So even if it didn't change their actual overall status, I encourage districts to apply because at the end of the day, they have to explain to their communities and their school board what exactly happened with accreditation. So I did encourage lots of folks to apply, even though it didn't change their overall status. But again, there was just a lot of confusion around whether districts should apply or not apply. I think there's a lot of districts out there that were discouraged by messages from OPI not to apply. And so I do think there's a lot more people that would have applied, had they not received that. So the recommendation I have for you as you move forward, because the addendum process is something that you approve and it is within your wheelhouse, my recommendation is to really provide some clarity around the addendum process. Also talk about when they should apply, who should apply, and how it works. Because right now, as I asked the OPI, is this in rule anywhere? Is there a procedure in place? Is it past practice? We didn't have a whole lot of answer as to where this addendum process came from or the practice of the addendum process. So I would encourage you as the body that does end up seeing these addendums that you put in rule or put in procedure someplace how the addendum process works. Last thing I'll say is just appreciate the time that OPI took in this and look forward to improvements in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Other public comment? Any public comment online? Appreciate your words there, Dr. Watson. Yes, this a process done by human beings. It's always going to be subject to error and needing to continue to improve the process. But that is what we are all about, continuous improvement. And so I'm sure that the OPI also embraces trying to continually make these processes better. Overall, I still think and definitely believe we are on the right track with these changes we made to accreditation with the processes. And so I really like the direction we're going and appreciate OPI's continued flexibility and working with schools to assist them in making this happen. If there are no other comments, we'll proceed to a vote. Motion on the table is to approve the addendum to accreditation status for those 15 schools. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 20, Chair Quinlan.
Mr. Chairman, item 20 is an information item on corrective action plans for deficient and advice status accredited schools. And I'd like to welcome Crystal Andrews.
Good morning, Chair Tharp and members of the board. My name is Crystal Andrews, spelled Andrews for the record. I am the Director of Accreditation and licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. So in July, the Board of Public Ed approved the accreditation status for all schools for the 2023-24 school year. Addendums have now been approved and the remaining districts will need to submit a corrective plan as part of year 2. A corrective plan is defined in ARM 1055-602-10 as a systematic procedure and timeline for resolving deviations when a school has an accredited with probation status. Cited in 1055-6056, it states for a district with a school in advice or in deficiency status, the district administrator and the chair of the local board of trustees shall submit to the superintendent of public instruction a corrective plan, including a systematic procedure and timeline for resolving the deviations noted. So you will see on page 470 in your packet a list of the schools that received advice or deficiency as part of their overall rating for the 2023-24 accreditation process, which results in the need for a corrective plan. There were a total of 128 schools with an area of need for a plan. All 128 schools had a rating of advice or deficient for the student performance rubrics. 6 schools received a rating of advice or deficient for both the assurance and student performance rating, and no schools needed a corrective plan based solely on the assurance rating. I'd like to take a second to compare the data, this year's data to the 2022-23 school year. This was included in your the accreditation packet from the report from last month, the July meeting. We had charts that showed it, but I thought it'd be good to bring it up as one of those was about schools that are in a deficient or advice status. So to compare, in 2022-23, 31% of all schools were in the deficient status. And this year, 2023-24, only 3% of all schools were deficient. In 2022-23, 17% of schools were in advice. In 2023-24, 15% of all schools were in advice.
And I know we're comparing sort of apples to oranges in terms of what is being assessed, but I think, this means that in 2022, 23, 48% of all schools submitted a corrective plan, and that only 18% for the 23-24 school year will need to submit a corrective plan. So this showcases the importance of the new accreditation process, providing districts the opportunity to achieve regular accreditation status through multiple measures. And with that, I stand for any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Chris, I have a couple of clarifying questions. How do you handle a school district that was participating in MAST and therefore didn't have, weren't yet using an approved test in terms of our process? So how did we measure their student performance?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Quinlan. So MAST was not one of the measures. And so what you're saying, I hear, is what did they do? So it was explained from the very beginning with our rubrics that they needed to use some sort of other vetted test, like a MAPS test or STAR Ready test. And so very clear from the beginning that that was what the measurement that they should have been using. From the beginning, it was said that MAST was in a pilot phase that was not to be used. And we didn't have any issue with that in terms of what was submitted. When it comes to the corrective plans, a lot of it was that districts didn't thoroughly read the rubric or see that, data needed to be included, not just saying, what they did or how they did it. It needed to be included was one of the areas. And again, they could do the amendment to then submit the data, and a lot of them did, as you saw. But that was one of the big discrepancies. Or for the college and career readiness for high school, it's how many pieces of evidence were included within the rubric. So a lot of clarification, understanding of what was being asked. And as I've heard already, others saying that has been cleaned up for this coming year. You'll hear that in a few minutes here, but that is being addressed so that it's really, really clear as to what is being asked from districts, in terms of what needs to be submitted.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Okay. This was an information item, so thank you, Crystal. Appreciate it, and we can move on to item 21.
All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just that for the board members, this is page 483 in our packet.
And this is the proposed accreditation process and schedule for the 24-25 school year. Dr. Merble and Crystal Andrews.
Thank you. Chair Tharp, members of the board, again, my name is Crystal Andrews, ANDREWS. For the record, I am the Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the OPI. So Dr. Merkel and I are here today to seek approval of the 2024-25 accreditation process. In July, we presented an overview of what the accreditation process will look like for the second year under the passage and adoption of the new Chapter 55 rules. I would like to direct your attention to page 485 in your packet. It explains in detail what schools will be accredited and what the process looks like for the current school year. As we shared last month, we have been working with the stakeholder think tank on a weekly basis to form the criterion reference guide with the scoring rubrics. The OPI plans to release the guide on September 23rd. The guide explains the categories of accreditation that will be assessed. For part 2, there are 7 new rubrics. Some of those include a completed graduate profile, professional development plan, and mentorship and induction. The guide will also have revised rubrics from part 1 from the last school year. Districts will have the opportunity to correct or improve information submitted for the 2023-24 school year. This will not adjust the accreditation status for the school year of 2023-24. However, it would be updated and corrected for this school year, 24-25 accreditation status and impact this year's status rating. The stakeholder think tank recommended that student performance not be included in part 2 since it was part of the previous year. Again, schools will have the opportunity to correct information previously submitted that will support the rubric scoring this year. You can see the proposed timeline starting on the bottom of page 486. Of course, today marks the first important date with this meeting, followed by the release of the reference guide later this month. My accreditation team has been working with the AIM unit in supporting districts with infinite campus data and ensuring that districts input their infinite campus data accurately. I do want to note, and not really part of the process, but I think it's important to recognize that the variance to standard applications are due the second Monday in October, which is the 14th this year. Districts are able to submit applications at this time. Information regarding variance to standard can be found on the accreditation website. The OPI team has been working every week with the programmers in the development of the accreditation system. Rest assured that this year's districts will be able to save their work, upload as many files as they would like, and see what is submitted during and after submissions. The complete system will be ready for year 2, and the anticipated open date for districts is December 2nd. We received a lot of feedback from the field about the due date. Districts did not like that last year. It was at the end of March, which with break holidays and breaks, it was hard for them to get that done in time. This year, having the program open 9 weeks before it did last year on January 31st, the proposed due date is February 28th. This gives districts 14 weeks to complete the process, which is 6 more weeks than last year. The OPI recognizes that many holidays that fall between the beginning of December and the end of February, so the extra time supports the completion of the process. Having the due date fall a month early also allows for the evaluation period to happen in March and April, so that the OPI is prepared to present the 2024-25 accreditation report at the May 2025 Board of Public Ed meeting. The final pages in your packet lay out the scoring for part 1, part 2, and the combination of the two for this year. The 2024-25 accreditation status will be determined using the submission from this year unless a district wants to improve a score from year 1, so they have that option. It is not a requirement for a district to submit anything from part 1 last year unless they have a corrective plan, which I shared with you in the previous agenda item. A lot of information. I will turn it over to Dr. Mergel at this time to add her thoughts.
Thank you, Director Andrews. Julie Mergel, Chief Program Officer for the record. To just kind of add, I really want to just give a huge thank you to all of the superintendents who've been online weekly and doing a lot of detailed work down to adding commas, just as you've done in rule. Really taking a look at the language to be sure that it's very, very clear and concise so that when those rubrics come out, they can really, folks can break that down and really determine what is needed. They worked so hard on really just kind of polishing up things like removing the language that says strong evidence or moderate evidence to just say, this is the evidence you have to get this regular status. I just want to share that in all of this conversation, I think it's been really important, and the dialogue with them in terms of what does it mean, whether you're in a small school or whether you're in a larger school, of the things that we're asking for. I think the piece that's been really kind of awakening for them, as well as for us, right, is that many of these standards have been in place for a long time, right? So when you take a look at like the mentorship induction, that's been there. It's just that it got moved into its own arm, right? And before we were checking a box that said, yeah, we do this, right? And now we're saying you have to provide evidence to support that you're implementing. But in that conversation, there's been a lot of dialogue to come forward to say, in some situations, are you really doing it, right? So we're not asking them to do something that hasn't been there. Like the professional development plan, it was really interesting to hear from some of our superintendents that they didn't even know that stuff was in the rule of what they needed to do. And it was kind of a reminder of, these are the standards by which schools need to be doing work. This should be going on already. It's not something additional we're asking of you to do. We're just changing the way in which we gather the evidence for you to prove to us. And I would be remiss to say, sometimes I think it's difficult in the past 2 years that we've worked on chapter 55. We hear a lot of comments around, well, we just have to meet the minimum standard. We just have to do what we need to do to check this box. And I think that we're starting to see now a shift beyond that to say, this is what we should be doing already. This is what we're expected to be doing. We're now just in a process of providing that evidence. It's the process that is causing I think, the additional work or clarification of how do I now gather this and what would be, and that's what's been I think the important dialogue is what would be good evidence to show that I'm doing mentorship and introduction. What could I submit that would allow it for someone to rate it and say, yeah, that evidence does demonstrate that you're implementing your mentorship. That evidence does show that you're implementing your professional development plan. And many of them, when we talk about those two, they do use the curriculum collaboratives, right? So some of the professional development is provided by other folks than just within the district. So a lot of conversation and a lot of deeper work on those rubrics around what is sample evidence that would meet that. But I just wanted to share that it's been in those think tanks, and McCall's been there. It's not just like kind of going through and determining. There's been a lot of learning and a lot of discussion and a lot of deep thinking around what constitutes evidence and what is it that we're doing and what is it that we are expecting that would be suffice to say, yeah, you have evidence to show that you're implementing it. So just want to thank that group of people as they're starting the new school year and they're taking 2 to 3 hours a week to be in these conversations has been, I think, very valuable and will help the process down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from board members? Comments? I have a question, Crystal, about something you said, and I guess I want to hear it again, a little explanation. You said that districts won't, for the 24-25 school year, that districts won't need to submit student performance data. Did you say that? And can you clarify, so why not, and when will they then submit it again?
Yes, so Chair Tharp, Board Member Quinlan, I did say that the think tank, we did a vote as to what we wanted to do with student performance data this year. It was decided that they did not want to redo student performance, meaning submit the same thing that they had already done last year. It gives districts the opportunity then to improve, as Ellery had shared. That is really the area that was scored the lowest. So they can improve their score. That would help then their score this year. Also, there was a large conversation around masked beginning this year for all schools and all districts to give a year to let that settle in all districts. It's no longer a pilot, so it's being implemented, but it's also new to some districts. Give a year to let districts to get that under their belt. And then as we're starting in with the 3-year cycle next year, start again with student performance using that mask.
So for the 24-25 school year, the evidence that will be used for student performance is based on the same data that was submitted for 23-24.
Madam Chair, can I add a piece to that? So all of those schools that were listed as advice and deficient in their corrective plans, all of those schools will have to go back as a requirement in this school year and go back in and improve those areas. So we saw a list of what 100 and I don't remember, Crystal, 128 that will be required to go back and submit this year as a component of improvement. And because when we looked at what was in the corrective or what caused them to be in advice or deficient, majority of that was in student performance. So we're going to see the schools that will have to, and then there are schools that will have the option if they want to improve the score that they had the previous year, they can do that. So we'll take everything from year one, migrate that over. Those that are in corrective have to go back and make improvements in those areas, which is going to be a lot around student performance. Those who want to can, and then we'll add on the year 2, add those 2 together to get the final so that we've completed the process for all schools so that when we start to go into 3-year cycles, it'll be all components and everybody will be on the same same structure to go forward. And then we'll start looking at not only 1 year's set of data, we'll be able to look at trends over 3 years of data when we get to when they're on cycle.
Thank you. And then, what are you collecting the school district's graduate of a profile, journey of a learner, whatever they've decided to call it? Are you collecting those and are they on display? Or how will those, do they basically link back to the school district website?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Quinlan, yeah, so per ARM, it does say it needs to be a public. So we would accept a link to their webpage. Even last year, districts had completed the process and submitted them because they were proud and, excited to share it. So we're more than welcome. We'd love to see them, and have it submitted, but in any way that is easiest for districts, a link, snap, a screenshot or whatever, just to show that it is a public document.
Dr. Tharp.
And thank you. Crystal, what's the platform? Are we still in TeachMT?
Chair Tharp, yes, we will be in Teach Montana, but it'll be separate from the licensure side of it. So it'll be its own, I'm not tech savvy, I'll call it a portal, but it's, through the Teach Montana, you log in, but it'll be on its own accreditation side so that it's not, mixed in with licensure any longer.
So one of the issues I know last year is once you submitted it, you couldn't really go back and see what you had submitted. Is that something else that the tech gurus have fixed?
Yes, Chair Tharp, that you will be able to go back in, you'll be able to see what you've submitted, print out if you want to have a copy of what you've submitted, it'll all still be there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Board Member Rasmussen?
How about the login? Crystal, last year, a lot of people had to use their own Teach Montana portal login, their personal one. Has that changed too? So that does not happen?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Rasmussen, no. So a login is one login. So a person has a login to Teach Montana. I have one login. I'm an educator. I work for the state, so I've tried to emphasize to districts that they can go in and update. If they don't want personal information in there, they can put their district information, but it won't be going into the licensure side. They'll use their login, their username and password, but then it'll direct them to the accreditation component of it. So they won't be in their licensure part any longer.
Follow up, please.
Board Member Rasmussen?
Thank you. Well, the problem I have with that is sometimes people leave or so, okay, let's pretend I'm the superintendent and I'm in this school for 2 years and then I leave. And then the third year, someone else comes in. Are they going to be able to get into what I have put in there and do the suggested changes or updates or whatever, and there won't be any problem, or will it be a problem because I always used my login?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Rasmussen, excellent question. So within Teach Montana, there's staffing components. So if you were the superintendent, you would be staffed in Teach Montana as the superintendent. Say you leave and Chair Tharp is the new superintendent, he would then be staffed as that superintendent. So he would be able to see everything for your district that was submitted. So it will carry on with the district and not the person.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Can I ask a question?
Sorry, thanks. Director Flynn.
I did go to a couple mass meetings where a couple of the new superintendents were trying to figure out what information was submitted for their districts. And Crystal, I told them to reach out to you, so hopefully they have, but I'm wondering, the way you explained it is that they should be able to log in and see the district information, but how do they do that then if it's under their own, you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out if it's under your own name, how is that same information then going to be tagged for this new superintendent?
So Chair Tharp, Executive Flynn, so that's going forward. So starting with this coming year in the new, very savvy system, it'll be linked with the district. So this year, because we had sort of just that abridged version of the system, We are just right now, my team, if we get that request, we're printing it out, or we're not printing it out, but we're getting all the files that were submitted for a district and sending it to them so they have copies of it, because within this first year, there was not a way to save it so that it could move forward. Going on, it will save with the district. So say my example is Chair Tharp is the new superintendent of a school. He doesn't have any idea what was submitted. Once he is staffed as that superintendent, he goes to that accreditation side of Teach Montana. All of that information from this year will be there. They are going to start to link this first year's information into it, since like Dr. Mergel said, it is transferring over. So that will be in the system, but currently as a new superintendent, it's not open yet and they can't see anything. Yes, exactly right. Please have them contact me or my accreditation team and we will get them that information.
And that's not an unprecedented process. Like when I log into the OPI secure site, I have access to certain things as a county superintendent. And then even when I log into the finance, I get to see only things from the districts within my county. I don't get to see everything for everybody. So I'm assuming that's a normal something with the magic that happens on the other side of the tech.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please.
Okay, I move to approve the proposed accreditation process and schedule for the 24-25 school year as recommended by the state superintendent.
We have a motion to approve the accreditation process and schedule for 24-25. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Hammond. Board Member comment. Public comment. Dr. Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, for the record, Rob Watson, School Administrators of Montana. I just need to preface my comments by saying that we stand in full support of help for the OPI. We've done a lot of great partnerships in the last year, including webinar trainings. Crystal and her team will be at our upcoming conference to talk to our superintendents about the year 2 expectations. So I don't want any of my comments to seem like we were not willing to support OPI in this process. We have done everything we can to really help with the implementation process, and we're happy to do more. I just want to remind the board of a couple of things. This new accreditation process, I think one of the goals was, let's create a process that's meaningful. Let's create a process that it actually means continuous improvement for the school. And I think you'll see that in this process. I completely agree. This process is much better than our old process. My concern, and I just need to voice this for a lot of reasons, primarily for my smaller schools that I represent. My concern is that I feel like we're rushing to get this process implemented. Not quite sure why everything has to be done, this year or last year. I made a similar comment about 18 months ago when we were looking at the year 1 requirements. And my concern is if we rush something, I think what you're going to see from a lot of schools is they're going to rush the product, and the product is going to be, I just need to get this turned in by February 24th or 28th or whatever it is. And so you're going to see a really rushed product as well. And it's not really going to be meaningful for the schools, which I think really defeats the purpose of the entire process. If I can say that, use that word one more time. I want to tell you that in comparison to year 1, I feel a lot more confident about going into year 2. There are some great things. I appreciate the opportunity that the OPI took to get some feedback. I think the rubrics are much better. There are some really great things that you're going to see in year 2. And like Dr. Mergel said, many of these things have already been required. A professional development plan has always been in rule. Having a mentorship and induction program has always been in rule. I completely understand that. There are 3 elements that are in year 2 that are pretty significant. One of them, the graduate profile. And you know that schools have already started that process. A lot of them have, but that's a community process that takes time. The other 2 that I think are pretty significant, there's 2 elements related to proficiency-based learning, one being around curriculum and one being around assessment. Now, a lot of schools are already doing proficiency-based learning. They're already practicing those skills. The problem is that that's new for all of us to have those discussions, to provide evidence of what that looks like. These are 3 significant things that are outside of what we've traditionally done or had to report during accreditation. So Again, those three pieces are going to take time. They're going to take community discussions, staff discussions. I just want to remind you of a gentleman that came and spoke to you about 18 months ago from a small school district. And he said when he gets ready to work on a team, he actually goes into the bathroom and looks in the mirror because he is the team, right? He's the administrator in the school. He's the only one. Now he can pull in a few teacher leaders and maybe some parents to create a team, but at the end of the day, he's the only one that's doing this. And honestly, he's not alone. We have about 70 schools in our state that are just like that. And those folks are working really hard on a variety of different topics. And these expectations are important to those folks as well. So I just encourage you to think about this, that when we talk about these processes, it feels to me, and I just need to say this openly, realizing it's probably not going to change anything, but I just need to say, I feel like we're rushing the process. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Board Member Rasmussen,
Thank you. For Dr. Watson, please.
go ahead.
So, Dr. Rob, this is a concern. You know, I spent my whole career in small schools, and I am worried that we're going to drive even more superintendents out of wanting to be in small schools. And of course, that will, you know how that cascades. What is a timeline that you think would be important, or that you think would be reasonable for implementing the whole thing? What, if you could wave your magic wand, what would not be required on the accreditation report this year?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. I have no concerns about the February. So when we talk timeline, I'm not talking about when it's due. The February timeline, I think is
I'm not either. I meant timeline year-wise, not within the year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and actually do have a couple of suggestions. And I did mention these to the OPI during one of the think tanks. So I just want you to be aware that none of these are perfect, but here's a couple of things to think about. We have a lot of schools with brand new superintendents. Like was McCall mentioned, they can't even see what was submitted last year. And so that's one piece. I think they will be able to see that soon, but for a lot of them, they couldn't even see what was submitted. So, and then we have a lot of other schools that would love to go back and do some redo on year one. So here's just one thought, you know, allow some of those schools to go back and do a redo on year one, hold off on year two requirements for a little bit for some of those schools. We have other schools that are ready to move forward, like they've already completed the majority of their graduate profile. Let those schools move forward and complete some of the elements of year two. Here's another just random idea, which I think is a great idea, but it's my idea, so that's why I think that. Take a look at some of the major issues that happen in year one. We all know that several schools got dinged because of their school goals, their ISAP goals. That was a common ding that I heard about. The other one that a lot of schools got dinged on was IEFA, and that's a really important topic for all of us. So why don't you pick 2 or 3 of those things that schools got dinged on in year one, and then do some professional development around those, and then allow schools to redo those pieces, because it sounds like a lot of schools need that. But there will be some schools that are ready to move forward, and let them move forward on some year two topics. So Board Member Rasmussen, I'm in a perfect world, let's make this a 3-year rollout. And I think by doing that, you're already going to have a natural cycle of schools that are going to be on that 3-year cycle. Some of them will be done after year 2, some of them will be done after year 3. And it kind of creates that nice cycle, because I don't think you want every school to be on the same 3-year cycle. That would be a nightmare for everybody. And I know the OPI has plans on how to address that 3-year cycle, but this is just an example of where we could slow things down a little bit, give folks some breathing room, and those folks that do need to go back and redo some pieces, they would have that opportunity to do that. And those folks that are ready, they could go ahead and do that as well. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Headley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up. Crystal, we talked about the possibility of small schools, or like a different look for rural schools. Did that come to fruition? Is there a kind of a separate plan or a different process or anything coming together for the smaller schools, like under a certain A and B size?
Chair Tharp, Board Member Headland. So we brought that to the think tank and talked to them about it. And it was pretty clear they were not in support of a whole different process for small schools. But to really make the process be as clear as possible, the rubrics be, as much detail and as many examples as possible, and then just offering as much support to those districts. We did last year, we worked with a lot of them. I can tell you, Ellery, Michelle, and I had our sessions with, a lot of the one-room schools, just helping them with their submissions, what evidence pieces. But we're already starting that. My team's actually going to be getting in a car headed to Great Falls, working with, going to the Montana Small School Alliance workshop today. So we're starting that process already and helping ensure that they have that support, understanding, and what will be expected this year. So not a different process, but just, as much support as we can offer.
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Watson on that. I heard from, folks called me in tears from rural schools that were the lead teacher trying to complete all of that work and teach their students. And it's a heavy lift if you're the only person in charge of completing every point of data for the accreditation entry. And I think we need to keep eyes on that and continue to consider a separate process for rural schools. Mr. Chair.
I guess I also am interested in just having a conversation here today about backing off some of this or lengthening the timeline on required submittals, but I think it's important to keep the graduate profile in motion and worked on this year. I guess I'm would like some input from Dr. Mergel or Crystal about what has the think tank, have they had any conversations about pushing back a year, perhaps the curriculum, both of these pieces related to proficiency-based learning models, the curriculum and the assessment.
Madam Chair, board members, I think that there's some pieces in there, right? Like, how are we, so even with the small school piece, right? So when we've been talking with that think tank on like evidence, a lot of the smaller schools work with consortiums. So I think in some ways, how do we build that safety net around and actually meet with some of the consortiums to say, if you're the ones who are putting together the professional development plans, right? How do we ensure that the professional development plan meets what the expectations are for a small school so that they don't have to develop it? They could just attach that as the evidence that they can show that they participate in this and this is the one they're using. In terms of the ones with the curriculum and assessment, it's looking at what is your assessment plan? What are you doing? What are the multiple measures that you use? When are you looking at that? So we've had some conversation around that. So I think there is some pieces about the curriculum component. There's a piece in there that talks about, for example, and it's been there, it's not new, but it's around the EFA. For example, describe the process that you use to evaluate your curriculum to be sure that it is authentic and does historically accurate for EFA. Not like what is the curriculum, but what's the process that you use to be sure you do that. And so it's having some of these like pathways, like do you show some kind of like opportunity to do that? How do we support that? So I think that like when I think about how do we extend this out, I think regardless of the time, we've got to be thinking about models, right? Do we have exemplars that we can share? Not to copy it, but to show why it meets the recommendation. How are we building opportunities to have these conversations, right? To be focused on some of this. So I think when we look at timing, if we just we're going to be here again, right? Having the same conversation. And so I don't, at what point then do we start to get to the 3-year cycle? And so for me, I want to get to that 3-year cycle, right? I want to get to that point where this isn't a process that we do every year. It's a process you do every 3 years. so that you do have that time and that you're implementing that. But if we keep pushing that down, when will we get to the 3-year cycle? Does that mean everybody again next year? And so I'm just trying to balance the piece between providing that evidence of what they're doing, knowing what would suffice, but also recognizing that accreditation process to be done well, as Dr. Watson said, with the meaning behind it, takes time, right? When we look at our EPPs, and we'll be looking at them here in a minute, right? They do it every 7 years, because to do it well, you have to be thoughtful, right? But I'm worried, because I was hoping we would get maybe potentially to that 3-year cycle now, focus in on some schools to provide more of that targeted support. But if we're still doing another year of wide, how do we pick who does or doesn't go into the 3-year cycle, or who is ready and who will be and who isn't? So we're just trying to strike that balance between how do we get to that 3-year cycle, which will be more meaningful and manageable, and be focused on it being a continuous improvement process and having that component to it. So I think that, like, some of the pieces from last year, yeah, we're going to have to go back with some of them and continue to do some work. I think we're always going to have to do that. But if we have to keep doing that with all 830 of them, it makes it difficult, versus if we can get to the 3-year cycle, then we're focusing on a much smaller group to help them get to that quality and have more time. So that's just some of my thoughts. I think it's a balance.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Merkel, do you have concerns about the quality of the process that school districts are using for these big components that they need to work on? And I'm not talking about part 1, I'm talking about the part 2 pieces, the curriculum and assessment and graduate profile.
Madam Chair, board members, I think we've got a range. There are places where I would be concerned. We've talked about it. I think that's hard. Board member Hedlund brought it up, right? Like, there were some teacher leaders. I know I worked with some teacher leaders on the phone, even myself, and the team did, right? To really provide them the support. I think that the piece that's so important is, whatever we do, we've got to communicate it, and we've got to communicate it in a timely fashion so that it's not here tomorrow, right? I think that this year we learned so much around not waiting till the last minute, and that it wasn't just, here it is, it's a checkbox, I'm already done. Those who were kind of taking the time up front and kind of knew it was coming, right? I think now that shock is kind of a little bit over, right? Now they know, oh, I'm not waiting until February 1st to open this up. They'll have a much better sense of what that'll look like. So they'll have that opportunity with 9 more weeks with it, even within the system. The system will be better. I think some of those things have kind of worked itself out. But that's just a very difficult question to ask, because I think it all depends upon unique circumstances. Are they new? What are the other variables that they're faced with, that they're working on? What is their situation? Versus some are ready, right? And I've even heard some comments in the think tank of, well, I'm just going to give the OPI what they need to do so we can meet this, and then I'm going to go about doing really the excellent work that I know that goes above and beyond what this is. And so I think it's going to take some time, because we're talking about a huge mind shift, and so at some point we have to go through it, right? And we got to learn how to do it if it's going to be different. But I'm worried about waiting to get to that 3-year. I worry about then it's another year, and then another year, and then we're finally in the 3-year cycle. I would like for those that are ready to get this all turned in, and then get them down the road, so that it's not every year. I think it's a lot to ask for them to keep doing this level of evidence every single year. So if we were to combine 1 and 2 together, right, that's a lot. And so I think we got to get to that 3-year cycle at some point. We got to have the conversations of how to make it meaningful, not about checking the boxes, but also not overburdening our school districts. And I think it's a unique balance. But we're here to support. We are willing to do whatever it takes to help get to that balance for our school districts, to be sure at the end of the day that we have meaning, that it's thoughtful, that it's about continuous improvement, and that it's about demonstrating the standards of what constitute the quality education. But I stand here to say, I'm struggling a little bit when I look at the outcomes we're getting. 1 in 3 students are graduating from Montana, you know, being proficient in mathematics. And so there's a sense of urgency. And so how do we support, how do we, you know, we can't expect them to do everything, but how do we get to the important things? And so we don't want this process to be just about the process. We need it to be thoughtfully connected to the work, because we have some urgent things in front of us that we've got to be addressing. I don't have an answer for you, right? Other than we're processes, not for just for the sake of processes. Let's just be sure that it's meaningful and manageable. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mergel. And what I'm seeing, and I've seen the schools that have just dove in on this. I mean, they've already got their portrait of a graduate out there. They don't need to redo their ISAP goals this year, other than that portrait of a graduate. So I see the lift for year 2 being less than the lift of year 1, although like Dr. Watson said, there are some different things, but they're different. They're going to be different. They're going to be time consuming, but I don't see them as being as big of a lift. I personally, as administrator at 2 small schools, which requires me to do this twice, one of them has a class, one has 60 some kids in it, the other has 5. And so Crystal, I would appreciate continued thought toward what does the rubric look like? Because when you analyze the rubrics, are they totally blind as for everything? Are they is there any recognition that when they look at Rorson School District with 5 kids in it, K through 4, is a little bit different look than Billings School District number 2 when they turn in what they're, and so that's just a suggestion there. But like what you're saying, Dr. Mergel, I would envision that when this comes out next year, you're going to have a very clear look. There's about a third of these schools who are just kicking butt. There you go. You're granted 3-year, go forth, continue to do the good work. There's going to be a group of schools, okay, we need a little help, and then there's going to be those schools. All right, let's sit down and get some help, and we'll give you a 1 year. And as we did this year with the addendum process, I mean, we're not intending to blow anybody up just because they didn't get the paperwork in. We want to make sure that we're assisting them. So I really appreciate the idea. Let's get some of these schools on that 3-year and let them move forward, because in the past, OPI supported and worked every school every single year on accreditation. You'd be able to spend more of your time focused on a third of those schools once we get into a 1 or 2 year cycle, or 1, 2, and 3 year cycle on that. So,
Mr. Chair, can I just say one more thing? I think then I agree with what you're saying, and I'm ready to move forward. But in terms of managing expectations for schools, it definitely means we're going to have a long list of schools that are in corrective action, and we need to say that part of the process, that's part of the improvement process for the long term. We want to improve the quality of our accreditation process and the reflection and the meaningful aspect of it. But schools also have to understand that it's okay to be in corrective action as long as we get to the other side of that. So I think that's going to be an important role for the board.
Board Member Rasmussen.
Yeah, I am not in favor of making this complete in 2 years. I just think that for many schools, you know, you're lucky, Mr. Chair. You have a doctoral degree and years of experience of filling out this kind of stuff. For our new superintendents that are trying to figure out if they have to drive the bus that night or be a substitute teacher to complete this and this is their first year in the school district, I'm really concerned about this. I'm not happy. I agree with Dr. Mergel that some schools are going to be ready to move on into the 3-year cycle. Let them move. Let them start the 3-year cycle. Get them going. And I think that some of them after this year will be ready to. Maybe after next year will be ready to move into the 3-year cycle. But I'm really worried about schools that have 1 administrator or maybe a lead teacher or whatever, and that changes maybe every year, maybe every other year. I'm really worried about those. And I think that having this chunk off in a little bit smaller, if you're a first year superintendent, how in the world are you going to finish your graduate profile, set up a mentor and induction program that has any kind of meaning, and also do a proficiency-based learning model as well as the assessment of that learning model? There's no way we're setting these schools up for failure, and not only are we setting up the schools for failure, I think we're setting up the superintendents and the new people in the profession for, I'm getting out of this. I am not in favor of that at all. I spent too many times in small schools, and I usually had help. So if we go to pass this this particular process, I'm not going to be in favor of it. I want the option for schools that are having X kind of difficulty to take another year.
The board member comment. Any other public comment? We've had a very rich discussion. We do have a motion, right? That's where we got, okay, just wanted to make sure we did that. We did have the motion on the table. Okay, that motion was action on the accreditation process and schedule for the 24-25 school year as presented by the OPI. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we can change the language too. So it's in process for next year, for the 70 schools that are small and not efficient. I think that's a big factor. Especially for a first year superintendent. And that's not up to us, I think it's just the discussion that we have with them and the support that OPI provides. I think we have different expectations for completion.
Prepared with an amendment?
No.
Board Member Hammond, did you say 70? Or you've got a list of specific
I'm
schools?
just thinking of the 70 schools.
Well, I understand that. I guess I also look at everything that we do is set in stone until 2 months from now. And then we have the option to make changes. We have, you know, OPI has been responsive in continuing to adapt and edit and tweak along the way. And I guess I would assume Dr. Mergel and Assistant Superintendent Max Dutz, if districts are coming to January and after it's opened up and on December 2nd and they're coming into January and saying the whole thing is blowing up on us and we just, I mean, it's a complete mess for the schools. I would assume that they would be amenable to looking at things and making some adjustments on the fly if need be. Am I correct?
Well, I would just say we are assuming the process will be smoother as we've presented already. So we hope that that would not be an eventuality. But I think as we've shown with the think tank and with our efforts to reach out to schools, there's always this feedback back and forth, and we'll be part of that conversation.
Any other board member comment? All right, we've heard the motion. Proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the action on the accreditation process and schedule for 24-25 as presented by the OPI, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. At this time, let us go into recess and let us take a break until 11 a.m. Board of Standing recess till 11.
Generous.
Happy hour. Yeah.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. As we get ready for our final push of the day, I look up on the screen and I see Crystal Andrews there. Crystal, I just want to personally thank you as we reflect upon these last couple of agenda items and where we have come from these last 2-3 years on the work of chapter 55 and the very significant shift from just checking a box to genuine continuous improvement and within some sort of an accountability measure, and also the shift of OPI moving away from being a compliance agency to a partner in assisting the schools in that. And it is a major shift for those of us who have been in the game for multiple decades. And I just want to thank you so much, Crystal, for all of the slings and arrows that you have worn and taken and continue to push on and assist the schools, because I know I've thrown at least 1 or 2 of those arrows at you at different points as well. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I will take them. It's all for the right reason. It's for our kids and the, continuous improvement for our schools. So they can keep coming, but I know we're doing it for the right reason and we are getting there. So I appreciate that comment.
Amen. All right, we are now on to item number 22, board members. This is page 492 of your packet. And I'll turn things over to Licensure Committee Chair, Vice Chair Hedlund.
Thank you. As you said, page 492, we are ready for a report on the praxis test scores. And this is regarding hard to fill endorsement areas. I will turn it over to Crystal Andrews.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Board Member Hedlund, and members of the board. And thank you for the recess. I was worried on how I'd make it through 5 more items without one, so I appreciate that. Again, my name is Crystal Andrews, spelled Andrews. I am the Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. So it was requested by the board to provide data on the praxis test scores in hard to fill endorsement areas. And as you said, you will see starting on page 494, 2 charts. The charts below represent volume and performance for Montana's entire suite of tests for those test takers that identified themselves as being prepared by Montana institutions for the current testing year. So in each September, the data in the charts represent the testing year that was concluded. Data is refreshed twice weekly in the ETS Data Manager, which is where I pulled this from. Since we are at a time when all areas are hard to fill, the data represents the tests that Montana educators are taking and their pass rate. Notice the Montana qualifying score for each test in the first table, along with the last time the test was reviewed. As you can see, special education holds the highest pass percentage, followed by English language arts. The lowest pass rate is art, followed by business education and elementary education. This data is what I was able to pull, like I said, from the ETS Data Manager on my own. I would be happy to work with our representative at ETS in the future to gather any further information, or if you would like to dive deeper into any information, I'd be happy to work with her on getting that for you for another meeting. I will say next month we will be holding expert panels for 3 test revisions, and I will bring the panel's proposed qualifying scores along with the test information to a future meeting. The revised tests that are coming up are family and consumer science, tech education, and social studies. So this is just a quick glimpse at kind of where we're sitting for this past testing year. Again, with the pass rates for the tests that have at least 5 or more test takers. So you see in that bottom chart, there are other tests. I was really wanting to see that Spanish test and what those scores look like, but that means that there was less than 5 people that took that test in Montana, so they didn't record the score. I am sure I could get that information from our ETS contact and anything else. So I have my pen and paper out, throw any more, things at me that you would like to see, and I'd be happy to work with her and get that to you. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Member Aston.
Crystal, do we have any way of telling how many of these are second time takers So I'm an English language arts teacher. Do we have any way of telling how many times I had to take that test? Is this just first time takers? Can we separate that out? That'd be interesting to me.
Chair Tharp, Board Member Rasmussen, I'm taking notes, so I will ask and dive into that and see if I can get some more data for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Crystal, I'm taking notes. If you could add this, could we check with them and see when the next review date of those tests are gonna occur? I think 2009 is maybe a little bit ancient for world and US history. And a lot of these are a decade old almost. Would love to see updates as far as when those are gonna be reviewed, what's the process around that? Just so we can be a little more current with some of these tests.
Chair Tharp, Board Member Singer, I completely agree. And actually, that was a question I had to our ETS contact, if they had a list, so I could have that here for you to see when the next, and they said that it's on sort of a basis as to when it's identified through ETS that it needs the updates. And an example I can give you, I think it was last year we did the library test. And it was in major need of some changes in terms of it still had like the card catalog as one of the questions and stuff that we do, no longer use. So they do, they do look into it and see how much of the test is accurate any longer. But I agree with you, and I'll push a little harder to see, especially like you said, on some of these tests that it's been quite a long time, if there's a plan or what that plan looks like, and get any information that I can.
Thank you very much.
I just want to make a comment. I'm very concerned about some of these. I mean, really, any of them under 80. And I guess that poses the question of, is it the test or the preparation? As a teacher, if 60 of our students are getting a 60%, what does that mean? So either there's an issue with the assessment or the preparation. And I know that we have many schools without music teachers right now, many elementary ed vacancies. And if it's because, a third of the students aren't able to pass, we have a what the solution is, but I think we definitely need to dive in, and would love to work with the colleges and everyone else to figure out what we can do, whether it's taking a look at the assessments or the qualifying scores or the preparation, figure out where the challenges are. Any further questions? All right. We will continue.
Madam Chair,
Member Rasmussen.
I just want to say I really agree with you. The pass rate really concerns me, and the reason why.
Thank you. All right, we will move on if that's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, please.
Item number 23, which is page 495, and we are going to receive information on the site visit and state exit report of the Salish Kootenai College Educator Preparation Provider and the Division of Education. And so we will welcome Crystal Andrews to join us again for this conversation, and hello, Michelle Price.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Chair Hedlund, and members of the board. Again, my name is Crystal Andrews, spelled ANDREWS for the record, and I am the Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. The State Superintendent of Public Instruction presents the Board of Public Education the State Exit Report of the Division of Education at the Salish Kootenai College as an information item only today. From May 5th 15th and 16th to 2024, the accreditation review of the educator preparation provider in the Division of Education occurred on site at the Salish Kootenai College in Pablo, Montana. The site review was conducted by the Montana Office of Public Instruction. Prior to the on-site visit, a group of qualified educators, including teachers, college professors, administrators, and content specialists, reviewed the institutional reports provided by the Salish Kootenai College for the endorsement areas. The purpose of the review was to verify that the institutional report of the EPP meets the requirements of the Montana Professional Educator Preparation Program Standards, PEPS, for both unit and program standards. The report provides the results of the review relating to PEPS as outlined in ARM 1058. The final State EXA Program Report 2024 is included in your packet starting on page 501. You will find a summary of the results on page 5, starting on page 502, with the initial standards followed by the advanced standards and the teaching program standards. At this time, I am very happy to introduce Michelle Price. Michelle has been with the OPI since August 2023. She is one of my 2 amazing accreditation specialists who has taken the lead with the accreditation of our EPPs. I will let Michelle share a little more about the visit to SKC. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hello, Chair Tharp and members of the board. I am Michelle Price, spelled Price for the record. And I am an accreditation specialist for the educator preparation programs of the Montana Office of Public Instruction. Again, the state report can be found on page 501 of your packet. During the Salish Kootenai College's review process, our team identified many areas in which Salish Kootenai College excels. Some of the highlights include the use of action research throughout the programs that focuses on applying it within the classrooms and subject areas, and then evaluating the impact it has on the P-12 students. They were also commended on the relationships they foster with their stakeholder groups, which have instilled transparency and a deep understanding of community. When supporting their candidates, they go beyond academic areas and focus on the needs of the person as a whole. While responding to the needs of their candidates, they have made a few changes in elements of their evaluation tools. They have already developed plans for the full implementation of these elements, and we look forward to seeing their completed data cycle processes in the future. I would now like to turn it over to Mr. Doug Ruman, the Dean of the Division of Education at Salish Kootenai College, for more information.
Thank you, Michelle. Chair Tharp and board members, Director Andrews, Dr. Mergel, and Accreditation Specialist Price. It's an honor to be able to speak with you today. On May 15th and 16th, we were able to host the visiting team from OPI and provide them with opportunities to speak with several of our stakeholders, with our faculty, with student groups, some of whom were current students and some who were graduates. During this time, we engaged in a lot of lively discussions about the various PEP standards. I have to say that, we were just having a conversation about the work that's associated with basically accountability for our state with educator preparation, just in terms of the school districts and the lifts that they have to do. And these processes for state accreditation for EPPs are also a big lift for especially for small colleges like ours. It is a tremendous amount of work to address the standards in the current formats with which we do it. But this process is highly valuable. It does come up every 7 years. And in the process of preparing for the report, we really have to look inward at the efficacy of our programs, the kind of assessments we're employing, and so many other factors to determine whether or not we are creating opportunities for great educators to enter our schools. And in the preparation of our reports, our institutional self-study reports that we submitted, we spent considerable time looking at these issues, and the process that we went through to redesign and revise our teacher education program assessment matrix or assessment schema, really gave us pause to think about ways that, are we meeting our own standards, as well as the standards of the state? Because we are a TCU, we're a tribal college, and we have to adhere to our mission and vision statements at the same time that we're creating robust experiences for our teacher candidates. So we really appreciated the process. We appreciated very much going through this process. It is a cumbersome lift, but we are poised now, having gone through the process, we're poised to put our revised teacher education program standards into action, and looking forward to the completion of a few last pieces of our assessment schema that we've put together. One of the principal architects of the assessment matrix that we provided is Dr. Tammy Elser and Dr. Amy Berlin, the former dean. And I don't know if Tammy, if you want to add anything about that assessment matrix or any of the other items that I've mentioned previously.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, board, and thank you, Michelle, and everyone who participated, Julie, obviously, everyone who participated in our process. We do appreciate the rigor of the process. I'd like to speak just briefly to one aspect of the report and our ongoing process that I think we need to, we're working right now, essentially to be able to articulate what we're already doing, not something that's brand new within the context of our program. We have a matrix that's highly developed that identifies very specific assignments that are linked back to our pre-service teacher preparation program, and that allow us to have a comprehensive feedback loop in terms of data. And from that information, obviously that series of critical assignments at SKC, because of our focus on action research, we actually have data on how our students have done in regard to individual children and groups of children connected to our clinical field experience. So it's an element that's very difficult to describe. And if somebody hasn't opened the right document of the, I don't know, 700 documents, Michelle, you be the judge. You saw what was presented, but if they don't open the right document, they may not actually be able to see the degree to which we've created an assessment feedback loop, not just with our stakeholders and our clinical partners, but also down to the individual level, or the level of the impact of our pre-service educators on children. And so that's what we're looking to capture more of in the future, but we also have fairly robust information and data on an ongoing basis. And we'd like to add that to the deliberations of the board as they go through the process of finalizing this for us.
Thanks, Dr. Elser.
That sounds like an incredible process and amount of work. So thank you for all of your efforts. Is there any questions from the board, or do you guys have any follow-up from OPI?
No, I was just going to say thank you to Michelle, Tammy, and Doug. And if we all are here to stand for any questions the board may have.
I appreciate the word of rigor being used. I think that's something for us all to reflect on today. I think we all need to remember that we're striving for rigor, and sometimes that takes work. And even just reflecting back to our last conversation, something important to keep in mind. But thank you for going through that process and working diligently at it. No more questions or follow-up from the board? Dr. Tharp?
Yes, it's just off of what you said, Susie, about rigor and recognizing that there's always room for improvement and everybody can do that. And I look through the list and I see met with notation, maybe one or two of them with some area for improvement, but notation just means, okay, hey, you're meeting the standard, but you got work to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with being told that there's a little bit more that you can be doing. And I think that's something that the EPPs recognize throughout their 7-year accreditation cycle, that, okay, yeah, we welcome hearing the outsiders come in and tell us, okay, there's some things that we can do to make ourselves better. And that same attitude, I think, would be beneficial within our K-12 system as well.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you to OPI for your great work with our EPPs as always. So we will go ahead and move on to item number 24. If there's no further information or questions. All right, thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, item number 24.
Rolling on the rest of it.
All right, we are on page 536, and we are prepared to take action on the recommendation for initial approval of the University of Montana's request to implement a health and physical education endorsement and secondary education endorsement. And I will turn it over to Crystal Andrews.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Chair Headland, and members of the board. If I need to keep saying it, my name is Crystal Andrews, ANDREWS. I am the Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. I shared with you in July that the University of Montana would like to add 2 separate endorsements, as Chair Headland said, first being the reinstatement of the health and PE endorsement, and then a new secondary education endorsement. You can see the process for approval of the new curricular programs and timelines starting on page 538 of your packet. The University of Montana has completed steps 1 through 4 in the process and is on schedule for the completion of the requirements per ARM 1058-802. I would now like to acknowledge and invite the Dean of Education and Director of Accreditation, Dan Lee and Christy Steinberg from the University of Montana, to share any further information about the 2 endorsement areas, as I believe they are there with you today.
Morning, my name is Dan Lee, spelled L-E-E. Thank you for having us this morning. I'm going to just say that the health and physical education certificate or degree is intended to restore something that we had one time, and to meet a need in our state that's we think is we need trained health and PE teachers. So we're proud to do that. I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Accreditation, Ms. Christy Steinberg. I think she can speak directly to both of these proposals.
Thank you. Christy Steinberg, STEINBERG, for the record, Director of Accreditation and Licensure at UM. Thank you for having us back here today. I just wanted to report, you went through the materials last time, but I wanted to report that we actually have 6 people starting into this secondary ed distance-based cohort this fall, considering we didn't get our final approval from Northwest Accreditation until July and start promoting it until really a month before school started or so. We're pretty proud that we have 6 people in that. And I'm happy to say that they're not all social studies and English. We actually have math, science, Spanish, art, and 2 social studies within that mix. And so we're excited that by the end of this next summer session that they will be fully licensed teachers and in our schools. I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Anderson Farg, are there any questions? I just want to say thank you so much for being responsive to the need in the state. I remember a year or so ago talking to Dr. McLean at the board meeting about being shocked when we opened the position for PE teacher and, had barely any applicants, and that used to never be the case. So it's definitely a need, and just appreciate you being responsive and look forward to having those graduates come come to the field. So thank you so much for your work and we will move forward with the motion. You're prepared.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm still baffled that elementary ed is on the hard to fill list too. I mean, but it's now, everything is hard to fill, and so we appreciate any programs being brought back. So, please proceed with your motion.
I move to approve the state superintendent's recommendation for initial approval of the University of Montana's request to implement a health and physical education endorsement and secondary education endorsement.
Heard the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion in the second for to just bring back the health and PE endorsement. Is there any further discussion from the board? Is there any public comment? Any public comment online? Right, seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you. Rolling on, item 25.
All right, we are now on page 540 and we are on item number 25, taking action on the virtual joint site visit and state exit report of Montana State University educator preparation provider in the Department of Education. I will turn it over to Crystal again.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Chair Headland, and members of the board. Crystal Andrews, ANDREWS, Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. In July, I shared the state exit report for Montana State University EPP programs in the Department of Education, and you heard about the process from the MSU faculty. Today, I'm here to seek action for the approval of the state exit report and regular accreditation status for Montana State University. On page 542 in your packet, you will find the state exit program report that was shared in July. This joint site review was conducted by the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, CAPE, and the Montana Office of Public Instruction. The CAPE team reviewed the initial standards, ARM 1058-311 to 1058-315, and the advanced standards to ARM 1058-605 to 1058-609. The purpose of the review was to verify that the institution reports of the EPP meets the requirements of the Montana Professional Education Preparation Program standards for both unit and program standards. The final state exit report provides the results of the endorsement review relating to the program endorsement areas along with CAPE's report. You will again find the summary of results starting on page 543, starting with the areas that the CAPE team reviewed, followed by the state. I would like to acknowledge and invite Dr. Tricia Seifert and Dr. Rebecca Turk from Montana State University to share any further information or final thoughts about the process. I believe they were joining us virtually, McCall. Oh, I'm sorry. Are they there? I apologize.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tricia Seifert, Seifert, and it's really a joy to be able to share and answer any questions you might have. But to kind of conclude that this process really does shine a light on the areas that we're doing well, on the areas that we can further strengthen. And I think that part of the quality assurance system and that accreditation provides is a chance to really take a look at the program that you're most deeply involved with and to share it with others for additional insights and feedback. And I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Turk if she has any additional comments, but how we were able to use this process to really strengthen our program and to share it with others and really engage with our stakeholders from around the state.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Rebecca Turk, T-U-R-K, and I just want to echo what Dr. Seifert said and thank you specifically to Crystal and everyone at OPI for working with us in partnership through the process. Really appreciate it, and we were able to really implement innovative responses to having the flashlight kind of through all of our programs, and we're excited to continually improve and really utilize all the feedback we've received.
Thank you so much for joining us in person. Are there any questions from the board? Thank you for the great work. I'm prepared to make a motion. I move to approve the state exit report and state superintendent's recommendation of regular accreditation status of the Montana State University Educator Preparation Provider in the Department of Education.
For the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second on the table to approve the MSU Education Provider program. Is there any further discussion? Is there any public comment? Not mine. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. 26.
All right, we are on page 584, and we will now move on to action on the site visit and state exit report of Montana State University Northern Educator Preparation Provider in the College of Arts, Science, and Education. And I will turn it over to Crystal Andrews and Dr. Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Chair Headland, and members of the board. Crystal Andrews, A&D REWS, Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the Office of Public Instruction. In July, I shared the state exit report of Montana State University Northern's Ed Preparation programs at the College of Arts, Sciences, and Education, and you heard from the Dean about the process for Montana State University Northern. Today, I'm here to seek action for the approval of the state exit report and accreditation status for Montana State University Northern. On page 588, you will find the state exit report that was shared in July. The site review was conducted by the Montana Office of Public Instruction. The purpose of the review was to verify that the institutional report of the EPP meets the requirements of the Montana Professional Education Preparation Program standards for both unit and program standards. The report provides the results of the review related to PEPs as outlined in ARM 1058. You will again find the summary of the results starting on page 589, starting with the initial standards, followed by the advanced standards and the teaching program standards. There you can see 3 areas of stipulation that Montana State University Northern will need to address within 2 years to retain accreditation. Those areas are 1058-314 initial program impact, 1058-315 initial provider quality assurance and continuous improvement, and 1058-608 advanced program satisfaction with preparation. At this time, I would like to acknowledge and invite the Dean of the College of Arts, Sciences, and Education, Beth Dorodoy from Montana State University Northern, to share any further information or final thoughts about the process. And I do believe Beth is online. I think I have that one right.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you to the chairs and members of the board and all present. I am Beth Durodoye, and the last name is spelled D-U-R-O-D-O-Y-E. And I am the Dean of the College of Arts, Sciences, and Education here at Northern. And I just want to reiterate points that I did make at our last meeting. And I will do that quickly because I do understand that this item is standing between you all and lunch. So I will keep it moving. I wanted everyone to know again that we are appreciative of the feedback that was provided to us in this process. We are already underway in terms of re-envisioning our programs, in terms of institutionalizing a number of activities. And since our last meeting, we are even in the process of hiring a TNT mentor for our students, with TNT standing for Teachers in Training. So our Teachers in Training mentor. And so we know that by doing this and more, we will be truly working to strengthen our programs and strengthen the unit. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you for joining us and sharing that information. Beth, are there any questions from the board? Member Slinger.
Thank you. So, Crystal, what is the plan when there's stipulations? Okay, approval of stipulation. And I know it's to come back 2 years later and show proof of that evidence. Is there any check-ins along that 2-year plan? Is there any updates on an annual basis, 6 months, or of where their progress is towards that? Or does all that just sit at the 2-year mark when there's another site visit?
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Board Member Slinger. I believe it's at the 2-year mark, but as I am still new with this process, I have my trusted colleague and mentor, Dr. Mergel, there that may be able to give you a little bit more information as I am still learning it as well. So Dr. Mergel, I'm sorry to make you run over there, but I think she'll be able to get that information better to you, Dr. Slinger.
Board Chair, Madam Chair, Dr. Slinger, good question. We will have a check-in at the year mark, where we will want to kind of have them submit some evidence so we can take a look at that. And at the 2-year mark, we'll again ask for some more documentation, and we will conduct a site visit at that 2-year mark. But there will be some documentation of them having to demonstrate progress at a year mark. And then we will bring forward to you that progress report as well in a year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. Any further questions? All right, I'm going to make a motion.
Good.
I move to approve the state exit report and state superintendent's recommendation of accreditation with stipulation status of Montana State University Northern Educator Preparation Provider in the College of Arts, Science, and Education.
For the motion to approve the exit report for Northern, is there a second?
Second.
Second, board member.
Quinlan.
So long. Further board discussion. Public comment? Public comment online? Seeing none, proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving the exit report for Northern signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, thank you all for that, and thank you, Vice Chair Hedlund, for the licensure committee's work. Before we proceed to our next item, I got something stuck in my head about these praxis scores and back on item 22. And I don't know, and that's just something I'd like for us to have more discussion at some point. And I don't know if, we got both the flagships here in the room, Dr. Steinberg, Dr. Seifert, and just wondering where the praxis fits in as a valid measure. Is it a gate that's keeping people from finishing? Is there a problem with the program? I mean, why are those pass rates so low? And that's just something I think that we need to look into further and find out. It's distressing seeing those numbers. It's distressing seeing our high school numbers. It's distressing seeing our elementary numbers. There's a lot of them that are distressing, but this is our latest one that we looked at. So I think that's something that more work for the licensure committee to continue to look into and see some questions and some answers.
Mr. Chair, could I just add to that? I would be curious to know whether that the data now includes under our newer rules related to licensure, if people are coming from other states well, not so much that, but if people are trying to add an endorsement by just taking the praxis. I'm curious to know from what avenue they are approaching the praxis.
Yeah, I think that would certainly explain some numbers there, and that would be perfectly valid. I think that would make sense. So yeah, I'd be curious to dig deeper into the numbers.
I was also thinking about what the comparison would be with other states. Is this, are we alone in this, or and great point, Member Quinlan, in the pathway, but the elementary ed one, I can't see that as being an added. So that one is very worrisome.
Yeah, that's not definitely not one you just decide just to give it a shot, take the test and add it. But I had some feedback from one person that said the test was horrible to go through, and I want to pursue. Was it difficult? Did you not feel prepared for it, or was it the test? You didn't feel that the test itself was asking good questions and see your preparation for the position.
It is interesting that special ed, the most recent version of a praxis has the highest pass rate.
Yeah. Will definitely be something I'd like this entity to dig more into. All right, as I noted,
Did you want to comment? No, sorry, Kristen's better.
Oh, they want to have it, yeah.
did the universities want to comment? I'm totally off,
But sure. Sure.
Again, I don't have to be in Lewistown for hours, so we got plenty of time to talk.
No, I know where the looks are gonna come from if we go too long. Christy Steinberg, Director of Accreditation and Licensure at the University of Montana. Steinberg, STEINBERG for the record. So I also, in addition to my role, sit, as I think many of you know, on the Praxis Working Committee, which is made up of EPPs, and Crystal Andrews from OPI is on that as well. So I know the questions that you all want the answers to, and I think it's very reasonable for us to get those questions to you. You know, there's 5-year trends to this. There's other parts to the story, I think, is what you're asking. And we would be more than willing, as a committee who's made up of all of the EPPs, to address those questions and come back at a later date with any kind of feedback that you have. Because I think the questions that I'm hearing, Chairman Tharp, you ask, and members Quinlan had been asked, are the same questions that we're asking. In terms of performance, what do we look at compared to states surrounding us? And we can get access to all of that, all of those data points.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you.
That was good and succinct. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to pass. I want to make school.
As noted yesterday, item number 27 has been pulled from our agenda. The individual has indicated they do not wish to continue with that appeal, and so we will move on to item number 28, election of officers. At this point, I will turn the meeting over to Executive Director McCall Flynn to conduct the election.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically how we will run this is that we'll take nominations for the chair and vice chair positions. We'll first go through the chair process, where you'll make nominations and then we'll vote for the candidates. And then we'll use that same process for the vice chair. We do the chair. Any questions before I jump in? Y'all are pros now. All right. Are there nominations for the position of chair for the Board of Public Education?
I'd like to nominate Tim Clark to continue on as chair.
Are there other nominations for the position of chair for the Board of Public Ed? All right. It's been moved for the nomination of Dr. Tim Tharp for the position of chair for the Board of Public Education. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. All right. Board has voted and determined that Dr. Tharp will remain in his chairmanship. Will be the chair of the Board of Public Ed. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
Great service.
Oh, no, I got it. I got this. All right, now we'll move on to vice chair. Are there nominations for the position of vice chair of the Board of Public Education?
Nominate Susie Hedlund.
Are there other nominations for the position of vice chair of the Board of Public Ed? None. It's been moved for the nomination of Susie Hedlund for the position of vice chair of the Board of Public Education. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say no. All right, all those in favor voted aye. The board has voted and has determined that Susie Hedlund will be the vice chair of the Board of Public Education. Congratulations. All right.
This is the first time in a long time that we've just had a renewal of leadership for a full term. I think so, yeah. It's a wonderful job you're both doing.
Thank you. With the help of our fearless leader. Thank you, with the team. Yes.
Well, you want to talk us through our plan for Bozeman?
You bet. I love our November meeting. We'll be in Bozeman, November 20th and 22nd. You'll note that it is not just a 2-day meeting. Typically, this November meeting is a bit longer. As you know, we meet with the Board of Education we conduct the Board of Education meeting, which is a meeting in coordination with our partners in higher ed at the Board of Regents. So that will likely be on the Friday. As you heard yesterday from Mr. Klapmeyer, we aren't certain yet of what that's going to look like or when it's going to be, but typically it's on Friday afternoon. I anticipate that we will also start Wednesday afternoon. And like last year, we did some tours. We did some larger work around our public charter schools. We met with the Education Interim Committee last year, though I don't anticipate that they'll be traveling in November, given the session coming up so soon. You'll see on the agenda that we've got some agenda items. Most of these are really just sort of items that we have on most of our agendas. A couple things to note, we would like to have an update from the Council of Deans of Education. They often meet, and it's a good time to meet with them since we are typically doing work in coordination with higher ed. You'll also see that we'll have time to take action on variance to standards requests and renewals. Those will come to us in November as well. We'll have the annual professional development unit providers list. We just see this once a year, so I think it's a really good opportunity for us to see who's providing professional development across the state. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. I can take questions.
Do we have any questions from a call?
McCall, at that point, we will know how many applicants we have for public charter schools.
Correct. And just to sort of reiterate, we'll have November 1st is the deadline at 5 p.m. Our plan is actually, as we receive those, to put them on our website. It's the easiest way to get that information to you guys. Although we did make the limits for those page limit to 26. So I don't anticipate that it'll be as big as last year. But I think it is an easier way for you all to access those, for the public to access those. So as we receive those applications, we'll be putting them online, and we have a page and everything dedicated to that. And then, sorry, to your question, we'll be sending out a message to you on that Friday once we get all that information so that you know. I'll probably do my update to you later that day. And then on Monday, I'm hopeful that our charter committee can have an opportunity to meet, have just an initial discussion about the number of applications and how we want to move forward. Do we need a special meeting? Can we do this in our November meeting? There's just sort of lots of moving parts depending on the number of applications.
Is there any public comment? Watson.
I will be quick. For the record, Rob Watson, School Administrator of Montana, WATSON. Just 3 things I wanted to mention. As you're probably aware, I think the board's aware, but if you're not, McCall Flynn, your executive director, has been volunteering to go with me to the regional mass meetings, superintendent meetings. It's been a great experience so far. We have several more regions to get to. I think we only hit 2, and then we've got 9 regions in total. So you would all be pleased to know that McCall's an excellent driver, and except for the birds that she hit. Just joking. But I have really appreciated. In fact, the regional meetings have went well. The superintendents appreciate her presence and knowing a little bit more about the board, and she gets a lot of feedback from the regional presidents on what's going on in the schools. It's amazing to me how different our regions are across the state, and so I'm always impressed with the differences that exist across our state, and I'm glad that McCall gets to see that. 2 other things I just want the board to be aware of. We have some great conferences this year. You're always welcome to attend our conferences. We've got one coming up in September in Bozeman. We've got some great speakers at that particular conference, including a person that will be focusing on school vouchers and sort of what they've seen in Arizona. We have another speaker that's going to talk about student attendance. This is an administrator out of Oregon that's done a lot of work around student attendance, which is a hot button topic right now. We also have MCEL in October. MCEL is in Missoula this year. Our big principal conference is in January in Helena. You're always welcome to attend any of those. McCall usually keeps track of who's on the agenda, and so if you're interested, just check with her and we'll work something out there. Last thing I wanted to say, and these are really open to anybody, are webinars. And we just started these last year, but they really have taken off. We had our very first webinar this year yesterday. And I know it was right during your meeting, so that's probably why you weren't there. But we had over 100 people on our first webinar, and really open to anybody that's related to K-12 education. We try to gear those towards our members, but if you're interested in any of those topics, you're welcome to attend. Our webinar yesterday was about school funding, school health insurance, legislative issues that we see coming up. So very rich discussion on that webinar. The one in October, we're going to focus on generative AI from the administrator's desk. We're going to have a superintendent out of the state of North Dakota who's done a lot of research on how to really have an effective AI plan and protocol in his district. So he's going to talk about that in October. November, OPI, working with OPI, the IEFA department is going to talk all about in education for all and how to get that integrated in schools. So our webinars are always the second Thursday of the month at 10 o'clock. We never change the time or the dates, so you're always welcome to jump on. We do record those if you can't be there. Encourage you to go back and watch those, but those are open to any educators or for you all to attend. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Any other public comment? Public comment online? Once again, I want to thank Livingston Public Schools for hosting us. We're looking forward to the future meetings where we can get out of Helena and get out and about into the schools. I think it's very valuable, very interesting to get to see the effects of all the different decisions that are made at the state level, and get boots on the ground and get into these buildings. That's really appreciated. So again, thank the BPE staff for all of their additional work and effort and getting us all taken care of here. And we will stand adjourned to reconvene again, scheduled right now for November 20th in Bozeman, but depending on how those charters come in, there's a possibility of a special meeting sometime early November prior to that. So we stand adjourned.